Chapter 601, Information. The scene where the rune snake and Anduin were located was originally a wide corridor. However, after the previous confrontation, the walls on both sides and the ceiling above had been shattered, exposing a vast space. At this moment, after the rune snake cast a spell, he seemed to undergo mitosis, instantly producing numerous clones of himself. In no time, the corridor was filled with at least 50 identical rune snakes, each holding a wand engraved with the same runes. This is a clone? Anduin was startled upon seeing the rune snake's spell. I didn't expect that besides physical clones like Jin Snidget and Pete, he actually has this kind of cloning technique. But are these clones just illusions, or do they possess the same fighting abilities as his main body? Before Anduin could ponder further, the clones answered his question with their actions. Mysterious snake! Times 50. The rune snake clones extended their wands in unison and chanted the spell. Instantly, a multitude of cyan magic snakes, far more numerous than Anduin's destroying meteor, surged forward in an overwhelming wave. These energy snakes, behaving like living creatures, roamed the battlefield. Some collided with the meteor magic bullets released by Anduin, while others bypassed them to attack Anduin directly. Seeing this, Anduin was alarmed. The most outrageous part was that the clones did not stop after casting the spell. They continued to cast spells one after another. Although their spells seemed less powerful than those of the original rune snake, one or two mysterious snakes were enough to cancel out Anduin's destroying meteor, proving that neither the clones nor their spells were mere illusions. No matter how fast I cast spells, I can't keep up with the casting speed of these clones. Continuing to confront them head-on will only waste my magic power. I have no chance of winning this way, Anduin thought, frowning as he assessed the situation. I need to figure out the secrets of these clones to regain the initiative. Fortunately, I am the weaker side this time, and the rune snake will not choose to escape like Pete. Resolving to find a solution, Anduin swung his sword, unleashing wild thunder sword energy that scattered more than a dozen mysterious snakes besieging him. He then fell back, seemingly melting into the floor as if falling into water, disappearing from the rune snake's sight. You even know the shuttle curse? It seems that traitor Thunderbird has taught you a lot. And the blue fiendfire earlier, you must be Gerald's illegitimate son, the rune snake mocked coldly as Anduin escaped through the ground. Without urgency, dozens of clones around the rune snake followed suit, burrowing into the ground without a ripple. The rune snake had also mastered the shuttle spell, making him equally adept at escaping through walls. After entering the ground, Anduin landed in a basement room, which appeared to be a kitchen based on the surrounding utensils. Without hesitation, Anduin knew that the rune snake, having learned the shuttle spell from the club, would have countermeasures. He needed to act quickly. Anduin wanted to use the shuttle curse to escape. However, he quickly discovered that the ground of the underground floor was blocked by an extremely strong protective spell, making it impossible to go deeper. Golden Snidget once mentioned something tricky in the basement of the rune snake. Did he mean this place? It seems that to win the trust of the Thunderbird, he wasn't completely lying. But I can't stay here any longer. They will definitely catch up, and I must get rid of these avatars first for any long-term plan. After a quick assessment, Anduin abandoned his plan to go down and instead rushed towards the wall next to him at high speed. When he touched the wall, there was no barrier at all, and he melted into it instantly. Just as Anduin disappeared, more than a dozen figures descended from the ceiling of the basement floor, one after another. Observing that there was no sign of Andu around, one of the avatars sneered, "This little mouse runs very fast, but both the ground and the outer walls of my basement are covered with protective shields. This level is no different from actively getting into an iron cage. Let's see where you can hide. However, just in case, we still need to send a few people to guard the entrance of the treasure house. That kid's attack power is ridiculously strong. If he accidentally breaks something, it will be troublesome." After muttering softly, 4 people immediately separated from the group and went straight through the wall in a certain direction, while the rest scattered and searched in different directions. At this time, Anduin had moved a long distance to the side at high speed, passed through several rooms, and finally stopped in a warehouse full of food. He was gently twisting the monocle on his eye socket, as if he was observing something. It turned out that at the beginning of the conflict, Anduin did not forget to collect intelligence. Whether it was on the frontal battlefield or in the rooms he had entered before, he had deployed a large number of surveillance spiders. The movements of these avatars were completely exposed to Anduin's vision. The avatars on the first floor are in a scattered defensive posture. Is this to prevent me from going back upstairs? No, I'm afraid this also serves as a backup at any time. As long as I am caught in the basement, they will definitely land immediately and attack me. As for the avatars in the basement, 4 of them headed straight in a certain direction, probably to defend the entrance to the second basement floor, while the others want to disperse and surround me? Anduin observed the movements of the clones and quickly summarized the information. There was no way around it. Although RuneSnake's mansion was quite large, almost covering an area of more than a football field, if things continued like this, his range of activities would be infinitely compressed. It wouldn't be long before he was discovered. There would probably be a huge crowd waiting for him at that time, so Anduin could not delay and had to react quickly. We still have to figure out the secrets of these avatars first. Otherwise, this battle won't be won at all. Anduin thought to himself. He then took out a strangely shaped metal dagger from his body. Its blade was no different from that of an ordinary dagger, except that a scaled dial was attached to the end of the handle. The 4 clones that are gathered together can't be alarmed, so we can only start with the single one first. Fortunately, the RuneSnake didn't install any weird protective measures in its own residence, otherwise it would be very troublesome just to move. After muttering something silently, Anduin focused his attention on a room he had stayed in before. At this time, there was a clone investigating alone. After confirming the target, Anduin immediately turned on the illusion charm on his tactical vest and activated the mute module on the phase shoes, then turned back and merged into the shadows. Anduin pressed himself against the wall, inching closer to the clone. As he passed through 2 walls and entered the same room, he observed the clone meticulously cleaning every corner with a wand. Anduin moved cautiously, sticking to the wall and circling behind the clone, unsure if the clone could see through his illusion spell. Utilizing silent movement, he quickly positioned himself behind the clone and deftly plunged a specially shaped dagger into its back. The clone let out a muffled groan, struggled briefly, and then disintegrated into strips of blue catkins made of magic, dissipating into the air. Without hesitation, Anduin darted towards another wall, entering a room he had previously checked and confirmed to be empty. Just as he escaped, 4 or 5 clones entered the room from all directions. Heh! Young people are always so impulsive. Attacking my clone will only help me locate you faster. Let's see how long you can hide, one of the clones sneered. Glancing at the wall Anduin had just passed through. Several clones then stepped forward and followed through the wall. Anduin, however, did not linger. Using the monitoring spider for detection, he evaded the clones and hid in a quiet warehouse. That was close. Their reaction time is impressive, he muttered, exhaling in relief. He then focused on the dagger in his hand, particularly the dial at its end. About 100 ticks of magic power, he noted. If each clone has a similar strength, and considering the RuneSnake released at least 50 clones, that means it took 5,000 points of magic power just to create these clones. Is this guy even human? And what about other potential losses when making the clones? Anduin's mind raced as he analyzed the information. The clone felt pain, and the rest responded almost immediately after one was destroyed. This suggests a high probability of shared senses among the clones. But is it just vision and hearing, or do they share other senses as well? He fell into deep thought, piecing together the clues he had gathered. Chapter 602, Insidious Tricks. Secondly, after the avatar is destroyed, it will not leave a corpse but turn into pure magic power. Judging from the perception just now, this discrete magic power will move in the same direction. It seems that the residual magic power will not dissipate out of thin air after the avatar disappears, but will return to the original body. Very well. The intelligence collection work has come to an end for the time being. The next step is to counterattack. Anduin narrowed his eyes slightly, a trace of coldness gleaming in them. After making up his mind, Anduin slowly lowered his right hand. Immediately, dozens of spirit-binding snakes emerged from the space ring on his right hand. This alchemy weapon, imbued with the incapacitation curse, had been upgraded by Anduin over many years, significantly improving its conversion efficiency. If entangled by it, it would take less than 10 seconds to dissipate 100 ticks of magic power from the target. After releasing these spirit-binding snakes, Anduin cast the illusion curse on them one by one, then manipulated them to scatter quickly, approaching a group of clones with clear targets. I wonder if you will feel distressed after draining all the magic power from the avatar, Rune Snake, Anduin sneered. Also, we need to take this opportunity to test the impact of sensory sharing on them. If you can really share consciousness with the main body 100%, don't blame me for being cruel. After doing all this, Anduin cast the illusion curse on himself again. Besides these small toys, he also had to prepare a big gift for the main body. Meanwhile, the clones of the runic snakes were in full swing, searching the basement floor. However, what puzzled him was that although he had basically locked on to Anduin's approximate location, he always came up empty-handed during the search, as if the other party could grasp their movements in real time. Is the other party invisible? But that's not right. My avatar should have no problem seeing through an ordinary illusion curse. It can't be that the kid has the Deathly Hallows invisibility cloak in his hand, right? Impossible. The rune snake shook his head resolutely. The most likely scenario was that Anduin had a strong perception ability or other detection methods, causing the clone to always miss the other party during the search process. Thinking of this, the rune snake immediately changed its strategy. He directed several clones to sneak into the basement, preparing to use the method of sitting on the sidelines to check every room and every corridor. He didn't believe he couldn't catch this little mouse. Soon, the avatars on the basement floor changed their behavior patterns. They no longer moved around, but stayed in place after checking one area, turning themselves into human sentries, constantly monitoring the surrounding movement. In this way, in just a few minutes, 90% of the space on the basement floor was blocked, and the remaining clones were slowly moving towards the last few rooms. No matter how much you can escape, you still can't hide from my net. I want you to know what despair is. The rune snake didn't believe that Anduin would disappear out of thin air like this. He was confident that Anduin would eventually get caught. While the rune snake was quietly monitoring the situation in the basement, one of his avatars suddenly moved, indicating that they were under attack again. Oh, it finally appeared. Let's see where you escape this time. The rune snake didn't seem to care about the fact that his clone was attacked. He knew the strength of his clone. A single one couldn't deal with Anduin. But as long as the opponent made a move, he could use this to lock onto the opponent's position and then send the rest of the avatars to support immediately. But just as the rune snake was about to react, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Why was the clone attacked again? The location was vastly different this time, with the two being at least 100 meters apart. Before Rune Sen could comprehend what was happening, he noticed his avatars appearing one after another, as if they were playing a game of passing flowers. Despite manipulating these clones to scan the surroundings, he still couldn't locate the enemy within his field of vision. Controlling dozens of clones simultaneously was exhausting, and the sudden situation only added to his fatigue. In his haste to find the culprit, Rune Snake discovered a metal snake tied to the feet of his avatars. By then, it was already too late. These silver snakes were not only rapidly extracting magic power from the clones, but also releasing a violent electric current. The current seemed to be specially reduced in lethality, causing no substantial damage but inflicting severe pain. At that moment, there were more than 20 clones in the basement. Rune Snake had been intensely focused on spiritually linking with these clones, so he felt the pain almost entirely. What? He screamed involuntarily as the pain hit him. It felt as if thousands of needles were piercing his skin, internal organs, senses, and brain simultaneously. The pain was so intense that he temporarily lost consciousness. RuneSnake immediately severed the spiritual connection with the clones and tried to disband them, hoping they would return as magic power. However, he was horrified to find that his clones seemed to be swallowed alive by giant whales, erasing even the magic power, causing him to lose thousands of points of magic power instantly. Realizing this terrifying fact, RuneSnake didn't hesitate and disbanded all existing clones, including those guarding the first floor. He had no idea what strange method Anduin used to devour his magic power. Just as he thought he could dispel the magical power of the avatars and have them return, a terrifying vibration shook the ground beneath him. Boom! The sudden explosion engulfed RuneSnake's location, spreading to an area of about 10 square meters around him. The explosion's power was outrageous, blasting a massive hole in the first floor and penetrating through the second, third, and fourth floors, as if a meteorite had fallen from the sky. Anduin, still hiding in the basement, couldn't help but punch the air in triumph when he saw the results of the battle. A human monster like RuneSnake required some tricks to be effective. Anduin had worked hard to achieve this effect, controlling dozens of spirit-bound snakes and hundreds of exploding spiders simultaneously. His mind was still aching from the effort. Unfortunately, through the thick gunpowder smoke, Anduin couldn't see RuneSnake's condition clearly via the monitoring spider. It was too dangerous for him to directly check on the snake, so he could only wait patiently. It would be best if the explosion had directly taken out his opponent. After all, the number of explosive spiders he used this time was several times higher than what he had prepared for the Thunderbird last time, costing him more than 10,000 galleons. Even if the explosion didn't kill RuneSnake, Anduin hoped it had at least left him severely injured. He didn't believe anyone could survive such a powerful explosion. As the thick smoke began to clear, Anduin watched the monitoring spider intently, waiting for any sign of RuneSnake's fate. As the field of vision gradually cleared, Anduin, who had finally seen the situation inside, was left stunned. Amidst the smoke and dust, a figure floating in midair gradually emerged. It was the runic snake. Surprisingly, not only was the runic snake uninjured, but there wasn't even a speck of dust on him. What protected him was a light blue magic shield that enveloped his body almost entirely unscathed. This magic shield bore some resemblance to Thunderbird's insulating magic shield, wrapping the runic snake in a 360 degrees protective barrier. However, unlike the insulating shield, this one had linear ripples continuously rolling across its surface, flowing slowly like a stream of water. This is too outrageous. Anduin stared wide-eyed at the scene before him. The strength of this shield was astonishing. It had withstood such a powerful explosion without a scratch. Even Thunderbird's insulation shield would have been somewhat affected by the blast, causing internal injuries despite blocking the superficial damage. But the shield in front of him had even withstood the aftermath and shock of the explosion. Anduin! The runic snake, still floating in midair, felt a faint sting in his brain, but was completely enraged by Anduin's actions. He howled hysterically. No one has ever been able to force me into this situation. Remember, you forced me. The runic snake was no longer calm. Next, I will make you taste real pain, you stinky rat who only knows how to hide in dark corners, he screamed ferociously. Without looking back, he flew straight through the large hole in the ceiling, ascending until he was suspended nearly 100 meters above the mansion. Give me up! The runic snake yelled sharply from the air, pointing his wand at the manor below. Immediately, Anduin, who was still in the basement, felt a terrifying vibration. His body suddenly felt lighter, and all the objects around him defied the laws of physics, quickly falling towards the ceiling as if the entire world had been turned upside down in an instant. It didn't take long before the entire manor, with a rumbling bang, began to rise slowly. Anduin, watching this scene helplessly, couldn't help but swallow hard. The building was taking off. End of this chapter. Chapter 603. This is unscientific. Requesting recommendations and monthly votes. The RuneSnake Manor, an expansive estate, began to rise from the ground floor, lifting the entire structure into the air. Anduin watched in astonishment as the ceiling seemed to move farther away, as if someone had removed a giant lid. To find me, you'd rather lift the whole house into the air? He must be desperate, but this is beyond exaggerated, Anduin muttered, exhaling deeply at the surreal scene before him. Soon, the entire manor was suspended over 100 meters in the air, resembling a dilapidated city floating in the sky. I found you, little bug. The rune snake, hovering in the sky, glared at Anduin with bloodshot eyes, a result of the damage from their previous mental link. He looked like a hysterical lunatic. Anduin couldn't help but smile wryly. He hadn't expected the rune snake to go to such lengths, even demolishing his own house. It was clear that trickery wouldn't work against him. It was time for a direct confrontation. Resolute, Anduin unfolded his flying cloak and soared into the sky to face the rune snake. After our previous encounters, the rune snake won't use the clone technique again. But what is that magic shield on him? It completely nullifies magic damage. I need to figure out its details, Anduin thought, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the rune snake's endless tricks. He took out a vial of Felix elixir and drank it, regaining his composure. The rune snake, observing Anduin coldly, was also deep in thought. Despite his mockery, he no longer underestimated Anduin. I remember this kid knows a spell that can instantly increase his speed to the extreme. Even though my physical abilities surpass Pete's, I might not keep up with his speed, the rune snake mused. Applying gravity directly to him would waste my magic and might scare him away. Plus, his alchemy snake can absorb magic. Using a clone might be futile. He glanced at the dilapidated house he had lifted. He's forced me to this point, so I might as well destroy it. The muggle stuff inside doesn't matter, as long as the vault remains intact. The rune snake's violent lifting of the house was driven by anger and a desire to capture Anduin quickly, preventing him from stealing or destroying his treasure. Scatter! The rune snake pointed his wand upward, glaring at Anduin. A sound of collapsing echoed from above. The mansion, made of rock, began to crack and seemed ready to shatter. Not good! Anduin realized the rune snake intended to use the house as a weapon. Stormblade, he shouted, slashing his sword at the rune snake. The dense magic sword light streaked through the air, forming a turbulent silver storm. To Anduin's surprise, the rune snake's reaction was unexpected. He neither dodged nor countered. Stand up to such a powerful attack is highly unlikely. So, the key must be the reserve of magic power. Anduin's eyes narrowed as he continued to analyze the situation. The rune snake must have an enormous reserve of magic power to sustain such a formidable shield. But how can I deplete it or bypass it? He glanced at the rune snake, which remained eerily calm despite the onslaught. The shield shimmered with an almost hypnotic rhythm, reflecting the ambient light in a mesmerizing dance of colors. Anduin knew he had to think outside the box. Maybe a direct attack isn't the answer, he thought. If I can't break the shield, perhaps I can disrupt its source. With renewed determination, Anduin began to formulate a new strategy. He focused on the environment around the rune snake, searching for any clues or weaknesses that could be exploited. His eyes darted to the ground beneath the creature, noticing the faint glow of runes etched into the earth. Of course, he whispered to himself. The runes must be channeling the magic power to the shield. If I can disrupt the runes, I might be able to weaken the shield. Anduin quickly cast a spell to enhance his vision, allowing him to see the intricate network of runes more clearly. He identified several key points where the runes intersected, forming the core of the magical barrier. Here goes nothing, he muttered, raising his wand. He aimed carefully and unleashed a precise burst of magic at the first intersection point. The ground trembled slightly as the runes flickered and dimmed. The rune snake's shield wavered for a moment, the ripples on its surface becoming more erratic. Anduin's heart raced with hope. He targeted the next intersection, repeating the process. Each successful hit caused the shield to weaken further. Finally, with one last concentrated effort, Anduin struck the final intersection point. The runes shattered, and the shield around the rune snake collapsed with a resounding crack. The creature hissed in surprise, its once impenetrable defense now gone. Now's my chance, Anduin shouted, channeling his remaining magic into a powerful spell. A torrent of energy surged from his wand, striking the rune snake directly. The creature writhed in pain, unable to withstand the full force of Anduin's attack. With a final, desperate roar, the rune snake fell to the ground, defeated. Anduin stood over it, panting heavily but victorious. He had done it. He had found a way to overcome the seemingly invincible shield. As the adrenaline began to fade, Anduin allowed himself a moment of relief. He knew that this battle had tested him in ways he had never imagined, but he had emerged stronger and wiser. "That was close," he said to himself, wiping the sweat from his brow. "But I did it. I found a way." He looked around at the battlefield, taking in the aftermath of the intense fight. The ground was scorched, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt ozone. But amidst the chaos, Anduin felt a sense of accomplishment. He had faced a formidable opponent and emerged victorious. And in doing so, he had proven to himself that no challenge was insurmountable with the right strategy and determination. As he walked away from the fallen rune snake, Anduin couldn't help but smile. He knew that this was just one of many battles he would face, but he was ready for whatever came next. To say that he is determined is a joke. If the exclusion is affected by this aspect, then the reasonable explanation is the mana reserve. The rune snake has a mana value that far exceeds mine. If this magic shield is really related to the mana reserve, it is more logical. Just as Anduin grasped the key point of the problem, the rune snake completed its spellcasting. "Open!" the rune snake shouted loudly. The huge stone house above its head instantly shattered into thousands of pieces, scattering slowly. Among the debris were numerous well-crafted pieces of furniture and decorations, creating a scene that resembled a meteorite belt in outer space. After breaking through the mansion above, the rune snake vigorously waved its magic wand. The spectacular meteorite belt in the sky moved quickly, hurtling towards Anduin at an alarming speed. Facing the imminent attack, Anduin didn't have time to think. He had to control the flying cloak to dodge swiftly. The wreckage of the buildings attacking him was divided into small pieces, moving at an astonishing speed. Fortunately, Anduin's own speed was not slow, making it easier for him to evade. However, the continuous assault left him with no chance to stop. As Anduin dodged nimbly, the wreckage did not hit the ground but floated in the air, circling around him. After a while, Anduin found himself surrounded by large pieces of wreckage, as if he had strayed into a lake made of building debris. "Mysterious snake!" the rune snake shouted. After blocking most of Anduin's escape routes with building debris, it began casting spells at him frantically. Dozens of cyan energy snakes twisted their bodies towards Anduin like plankton. Anduin frowned. Is he planning to overwhelm me with massive spells? But the rune snake should know that doesn't work on me. Now is not the time to think too much. Facing the dual threat of building wreckage and magic snakes, Anduin skillfully navigated through the sea of meteorites. He used a long sword or shield to smash or deflect the magical attacks, and even used the building debris as cover to block the attacks. Although Anduin appeared very harried for a while, he was not actually in any real danger. End of this chapter. Chapter 604, Absolute Defense. Combine. Just as Anduin was expending most of his energy dodging and defending against the relentless attacks, the rune snake made another move. After releasing nearly 100 secret snakes, the rune snake allowed them to automatically seek out and attack the enemy. Then, it pointed its wand towards Anduin's position. Under its control, the wreckage of the buildings hovering in midair began to converge rapidly towards Anduin, pressing in from all directions. Seeing this, Anduin quickly realized the rune snake's plan. It intended to crush him to death. Without hesitation, he activated the overload form and swiftly flew to one side, attempting to escape from this sea of meteorites. However, the gaps between the building wreckages were narrow, preventing Anduin from increasing his speed. Additionally, the overwhelming number of mysterious snakes surrounding him interrupted his actions, forcing him to spend time parrying their powerful spells. To make matters worse, Anduin felt a strong suction force centered on his position. The rune snake had cast a gravitational spell on him, further reducing his speed. Dragged back, and with the wreckage closing in from all sides, Anduin's escape routes were quickly blocked. The space around him grew smaller and smaller, and the entanglement of the mysterious snakes left him no chance to draw his sword and cast a spell to open a passage. Soon, the wreckage of the buildings had formed a rock ball around Anduin. With more pressure, Anduin would be crushed and twisted into minced meat. Ha! The rune snake couldn't contain its excitement any longer and laughed loudly. Shameless little bug, let's see where you can run this time. Turn into dust. Increasing its output of magic power, the rune snake intensified the inward pressure on the closing wreckage, wishing for Anduin's immediate demise. Wow! Cry. Just when the rune snake thought Anduin was doomed, two clear birdsongs suddenly echoed from the sky. The rune snake vaguely saw a crimson figure flash through the rock ball in front of it. Inside the wreckage, Anduin had less than 2 meters of space to move and was on the brink of being crushed. Suddenly, a flame ignited out of thin air beside him, and a graceful phoenix sprang forth. Seeing this, Anduin didn't hesitate. He swung his sword to fend off the mysterious snakes entangled around him and immediately reached out to grasp the sharp claws of the phoenix. Instantly, his entire body ignited, transforming into a ball of flames that disappeared from the confined space. The moment he escaped, the sphere formed by the wreckage completely shrank and closed, continuing to tighten and crush. The force of the explosion was so immense that even the mysterious snakes remaining in the center were crushed, turning into strands of pure magic power. While casting the spell, the rune snake constantly perceived everything within the stone ball. After a moment, it showed a gloomy expression and coldly turned its head to look behind it. 100 meters away, a thunderbird, much larger than a lion and exuding a powerful aura, appeared in its line of sight. Anduin, who had just escaped from the wreckage, had a phoenix perched on his shoulder. As soon as he landed on the little thunderbird Thor's back, Anduin immediately released the overload and then took out a bottle of phoenix tears, pouring them down his throat. After finishing all this, Anduin breathed a sigh of relief. Thor, Irene, thank goodness you two arrived in time. Otherwise, I might have been in real danger this time, especially you, Irene, Anduin said, patting the little phoenix affectionately. Hey! The little phoenix let out a high-pitched cry at Anduin's words, flapping its wings excitedly. Thor, beneath him, tilted his head slightly, puzzled. Big brother, when did you name the little phoenix? How come I didn't know? At that moment, Shalter's voice came through the communicator in Anduin's ear. My lord, how are you now? After I received your message, I rush over immediately along the coordinates. But the pressure in the sky is too intense. I don't even dare to get close. I had to send the two of them to support you. Good job, Shaltir, Anduin nodded approvingly. The battle here is not something you can intervene in. Prioritize your own safety. Also, start deploying anti-apparition jammers and anti-portkey jammers around this valley. Yes, my lord, Shaltir's voice responded again. But are you really okay? That big ball in the sky looks terrifying. If it doesn't work out, let's retreat first. Don't worry, I don't fight uncertain battles. The rune snake is at its weakest right now. If I can't defeat it now, I won't have another chance in the future, Anduin replied softly, then turned his gaze back to the distant rune snake. Although his support had arrived, dealing with the rune snake's absolute defense was still very troublesome. Fortunately, with little Phoenix Irene by his side, he was confident he could escape if things went south. But how to break through the magic shield on the opponent? Anduin had realized that the rune snake's magic protection was likely tied to its magic power reserve. Perhaps the shield was maintained by its massive magic power. In other words, to break through this shield, he would need to deplete all the rune snake's magic power. But how much magic power did it have left? Anduin frowned as he calculated his reserves. Assuming the damage he caused was equivalent to the mana consumed by the shield, with his current mana reserves, even if he used all his boosts, he could only cause 2,000 to 2,500 mana points of damage at most. He had only one Phoenix Tears left, meaning he could deal about 5,000 points of damage if he went all out. This was assuming he could use all his mana for offense, and the rune snake wouldn't just stand there and let him attack. Considering defense and movement, he could consume 3,000, 4,000 points of mana. But even if he dealt full damage, could he really break through the opponent's defense? The rune snake had existed since the silver spear was active, and the silver spear duel club was prevalent in the 18th century, meaning the rune snake was about 300 years old. If compared with the 100-year-old Thunderbird, whose mana was in the early 2000s, the total mana of the rune snake should be in the range of 6,000 to 7,000. But was this really the case? Logically, the other two clones had been killed by him. Even if Pete had collected his magic power and transmitted it back to the main body before dying, the rune snake should not be at full strength. Additionally, killing more than 20 clones of the opponent had indirectly consumed more than 2,000 points of mana. When he split the mansion, Anduin had also unleashed a full set of attacks, which should have caused a 2,000 points of mana damage to the rune snake. Considering the consumption from the rune snake's confrontation with him, after casting numerous spells, the magic power consumed by the rune snake should be around 6,000. However, looking at his current state, where he shows no signs of physical exhaustion, it seems his magic power reserves are far greater than I initially calculated. Additionally, let's not forget that the rune snake previously summoned over 50 clones without hesitation. By my estimation, that would have required using 90% of his magic power to create those clones. Would someone as cautious as the rune snake take such a risk? The more Anduin thought about it, the more he realized that the opponent's mana reserves were unfathomable. He had a premonition that even if he exhausted all his mana, he might not be able to break through the magic shield. Is there really no way to deal with this old man? Wait, Anduin, who was deep in thought, suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He had been overlooking something. Gerald the Thunderbird. Why did the rune snake show fear of the Thunderbird earlier? Anduin could tell it wasn't an act. The rune snake genuinely feared the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird's magic power reserve is well-known 10, Anduin. It's only in the early 4,000s. Although it's not a lot, with the right amplification and strength, it could potentially double the damage, reaching around 8,000 points. Even if the rune snake stood still and let the Thunderbird attack, it might not be enough to break the defense. Could it be that the Thunderbird has some means to restrain the rune snake? Gerald is probably the most straightforward guy in the club. He focuses all his energy on enhancing the power of his magic. Does he have any other specialties besides his ferocity? Power? Anduin seemed to realize something. Could it be that to break the rune snake's magic shield, there is a threshold of defense strength that needs to be surpassed, in addition to exhausting his magic power? It's not impossible. As the club's top fighter, the Thunderbird's combat power is exceptionally high. Coupled with his extremely firm will, the instant damage caused by his spells is far greater than anyone else's. Not to mention, he is the most hated enemy of the rune snake, which might allow him to unleash 120% of his strength when fighting him. If the shield has an upper limit of defense, perhaps the rune snake fears that the Thunderbird could go all out and break through his defense, dealing a fatal blow. This is worth a try. Anduin's heart raced as he calculated the most powerful magic in his arsenal, aiming for a spell that could unleash a massive amount of damage in an instant. End of this chapter. Chapter 605, Overload Change. Do you still want to use that trick? Anduin sighed lightly, looking up at the sky. Although it was covered with clouds, it was mostly sunny. Seeing this, Anduin lowered his head and patted the little Thunderbird beneath him. Saul, do you know how to summon thunderclouds now? Cry. Saul held his head up confidently, indicating that it was a piece of cake. Controlling the weather, especially summoning thunderstorms, was an instinct engraved in his bones. Very good, Anduin nodded in satisfaction. Now I need you to do me a favor. Fill the sky above us with thunderstorms. The more violent, the better. Cry. Saul nodded in response, then shook his wings and rushed straight into the sky. The runic snake on the other side saw Anduin using the phoenix's teleportation to escape and ascend to the heavens, and couldn't help but feel furious. Why does this guy have so many tricks, and even a phoenix as a pet? But soon, he looked at the phoenix with greedy eyes. This is a magical creature with exaggerated vitality. If he could catch it, how many elixirs could he make? The thought of killing Anduin became even stronger. After a moment of contemplation, the rune snake ignored the thunderbird flying into the sky and pointed at the giant stone ball with his backhand. The stone ball split again, turning into thousands of stones and hurtling towards Anduin. "Do you still want to repeat the old trick?" Anduin sneered, activating the overload form again. He charged at the rune snake, not giving the wreckage any more time to surround him. His goal now was to delay as much time as possible, allowing Sol to change the sky and increase his chances of delivering the final blow. The runic snake, seeing Anduin rushing up, gritted his teeth and charged as well. He didn't like close-quarters combat, but now, to quickly deal with his opponent, he had to fight hard. Mysterious Snake. While rushing forward, the rune snake cast a spell, and a large number of magic snakes spewed out, rushing towards Anduin. Seeing that he could still cast energy-intensive magic so calmly, Anduin reaffirmed his guess. The magic power of this old thing was probably more than half left, and there was no chance of winning in a frontal battle. Thundercrow technique, Anduin muttered softly, and swarms of ravens rushed out from under his cloak, colliding with the mysterious snakes. However, Anduin's thundercrows only had a small amount of wild thunder attached to them. Although their numbers were huge, they were completely vulnerable to the mystic snakes. A single magic snake could kill 7 or 8 of his thundercrows, but at least this gave Anduin enough time to approach. Overload, Swift Sword. The desolation in Anduin's hand was instantly filled with wild thunder, transforming into a 3-meter-long sword. He rushed at the opponent and slashed with the sword. Reject! The rune snake pointed his wand at Anduin, and a huge repulsive force was instantly generated, rushing towards him. However, at the moment the rune snake cast the spell, the phoenix that had been holding on to Anduin suddenly turned into flames and disappeared into the air with Anduin. Then it reappeared behind the rune snake in an instant. The long sword of desolation had already been slashed down heavily, and Anduin seized the precious moment, dancing the sword and making 7 or 8 consecutive slashes in a short period, causing the opponent's magic shield to surge continuously. However, his slashes still couldn't penetrate the shield. The rune snake's reaction was swift. Seeing that the other party had a means to avoid his gravitational spell, he stopped using it. Anduin didn't waste his mana in vain. Instead, he used it to manifest a spear, taking turns with his opponent. Seeing this, Anduin realized that someone dared to engage in close combat with him. He immediately used his superb fighting experience to dodge in the air and attack his opponent. However, after clashing with the opponent's spear, Anduin was sent flying backward. It felt as if he had been swatted away like a mosquito. What kind of power does this guy have? Such an exaggeration. Anduin thought as he stabilized himself. The sensation of their clash lingered in his hands, akin to wrestling with an elephant. He was no match for his opponent. Even his physical strength is so exaggerated, this old man's strength defies common sense. Anduin cursed under his breath. But now was not the time for emotions. The rune snake seemed to realize that Anduin's close combat skills were no match for him, and immediately pounced, stabbing and slashing with great joy. Seeing this, Anduin didn't dare to be careless. Although the rune snake was well-proportioned, its strength was comparable to that of a giant. Anduin couldn't afford to take the rune snake's attacks head-on anymore. He had to rely on his agility, dodging and weaving around his opponent, taking opportunities to land a hit or two. Thus, the rune snake and Anduin fell into a prolonged battle. One side had a strong defense and didn't dodge attacks, while the other was agile and flexible, darting around like a mosquito. Neither could resolve the battle quickly. However, the rune snake was quite content with this situation, as it favored him in a battle of attrition. He had already noticed that Anduin's magic power had been exhausted twice before. The only reason Anduin could persist now was due to some kind of potion replenishing his mana. According to the rune snake's estimation, Anduin would be exhausted in a few more minutes, while his own magic power remained abundant. Once Anduin's physical strength was completely depleted, the rune snake's speed would catch up with him. At close range, he could use mental shock to interrupt Anduin's teleportation, allowing him to capture both Anduin and the Phoenix in one fell swoop. For now, he needed to continue exerting pressure and depleting Anduin's magic power. The plan was working. While the two fought with their own strategies, a storm was gradually brewing in the sky above. Little Thunderbird Saul darted through the clouds at high speed, releasing his nature and channeling his magic to accumulate electric charges and water vapor. Soon, the sky darkened as if ink had been splashed across it, and faint flashes of thunder flickered between the dark clouds. As time passed, the flashes became more frequent and widespread, resembling a high-speed engine wrapped in electric light, ready to ignite at any moment. The rune snake noticed the vision in the sky, but didn't pay much attention at first. However, as the power above grew fiercer, he began to feel suspicious. Yet, he was too entangled with Anduin to investigate. The rune snake still believed in his defense, thinking that Anduin couldn't break through it. No matter what happened next, he felt confident in his own strength. As the thunderclouds in the sky intensified, Anduin, who still had some strength left, suddenly parried the powerful impact of the rune snake's attack and was propelled backward a considerable distance. The rune snake, thinking Anduin was preparing for another assault, was taken aback when the phoenix on Anduin's shoulder transformed into a ball of flames and vanished, taking Anduin with it. Huh? Did he flee because the situation looked grim? The rune snake extended its perception, puzzled, and then abruptly looked up at the sky. No, he's up there. At that moment, Anduin appeared amidst the clouds, quickly downing his last bottle of phoenix tears. He then yelled loudly and began to absorb the surrounding electrical charge with fervor. Rune snake, witness my sword technique descending from the heavens, Anduin muttered coldly. His entire body became enveloped in violent lightning, making him appear almost transparent, as if he had become the embodiment of thunder and lightning. Overload! Change! With Anduin's incantation, the entire cloud layer, like a sponge being wrung dry, funneled its lightning into Anduin's body, transforming the stormy sky into a clear one. What is this? The rune snake, looking up in bewilderment, felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The terrifying aura emanating from Anduin made the rune snake feel an unavoidable fear. No, I can't withstand this. I must escape. Recovering from his panic, the rune snake attempted to use the anti-apparition spell he had cast earlier. However, he quickly realized that apparition was still unusable. Desperately, he pulled out another port key, but it too failed to activate. How is this possible? Why isn't the port key working? The rune snake tried again, but to no avail. Panic set in, but his survival instincts kicked in. He split into more than a dozen clones, each darting in different directions to evade Anduin's impending attack. It's useless. I can see through you in this state, Anduin declared. In his current form, the fleeing rune snakes appeared as glowing figures, and he could easily identify the original by the intensity of its light. Anduin could now directly perceive the magic within a human body. Locking onto the rune snake's true form, Anduin descended with his sword, transforming himself into a bolt of lightning. God, destroy! Slash! End of this chapter. Chapter 606, The Darkness of Evolution. Ping! A deafening noise echoed through the nameless valley as a thick, pure silver lightning bolt struck down from the sky, hitting something with immense force. The power that erupted at that moment seemed to penetrate the very fabric of the world. This was the scene that Shaltir, hiding in the distance and trembling, witnessed from afar. When the lightning struck, Shaltir had to admit, she was terrified to the point of losing control. The violent sonic boom merged with tsunami-like airwaves, radiating from the point of impact. Even Shaltir, who was far away, was almost blown off her feet. It took nearly half a minute for the surroundings to gradually return to calm. The area where the lightning had struck was now a large sunken crater, resembling a meteor impact site. Just as Shaltir thought it was over, the wreckage of buildings, suspended in the air due to the anti-gravity effect, suddenly plummeted, creating a rain of stones. After nearly another minute, the entire valley finally fell silent. A weak voice then reached Shaltir's ears. Come here. Yes, my lord. Hearing Anduin's voice again, Shaltir's heart, which had been gripped with fear, finally relaxed. But as she took a step forward, she suddenly collapsed to the ground. Struggling to get up, she realized she had been trembling with fear from the terrifying display of power. It took her a long time to stabilize her breathing and regain her mobility. With her suitcase in hand, Shaltir scrambled towards the crater. When she arrived, two figures descended from the sky, the little Thunderbird Thor, who was also panting, and the Phoenix Irene. Shaltir was shocked by the tragic scene in the deep pit. In the center lay a destroyer, still crackling with electricity, barely recognizable as human. Anduin's figure was slumped a meter away from the corpse, in a very bad state. His upper body clothes were torn, and his tactical vest had turned into charred debris, revealing his naked, robust body. Anduin's skin was glowing with a strange blush, and large patches were broken and peeling, as if scalded by high temperatures. Shaltir carefully observed Anduin. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to have lost consciousness, with only faint gasps indicating he was still alive. Wow! Irene, hovering in midair, looked at the miserable Anduin with distress. She slowly landed beside him, her flat head closing her eyes. Several teardrops slipped from her eyelids and dripped onto Anduin's body. The tears sizzled as they touched Anduin's skin, evaporating quickly. But Phoenix's tears were extraordinary. Despite some evaporating, many still seeped into his body. Gradually, Anduin's skin returned to a normal color, and new, baby-like skin grew under the cracked and peeling old skin. Cough, cough! Anduin suddenly coughed violently, spewing out a large mouthful of blood, and began to gasp for air. Thank goodness! Shaltir, who had been observing his condition, realized that Anduin was recovering. She immediately took out several bottles of high-level tonics and carefully administered them to him. Anduin brought the potion to his lips. He was like a man who had been wandering in the desert for days without water. The moment the potion touched his lips, he swallowed it eagerly. Huh! Anduin finally regained some strength and let out a deep breath. I didn't expect the side effects of casting God's extinction slash at full power in an overloaded state to be so severe. It's fortunate you were here to take care of me. Otherwise, I might have perished along with the rune snake. He glanced gratefully at Shaltir, Thor, and Irene beside him. Without their help in today's grueling battle, the outcome might have been very different. My lord, is this charred corpse really the rune snake? Did we truly kill it? Shaltir asked, looking at the remains next to them. Yes, this creature had an incredibly strong magic shield that couldn't be penetrated by ordinary attacks. By absorbing the electric charge Mem the thunderstorm, I amplified my magic power to over 2,000 ticks. I then concentrated all that power into a single point, breaking through the shield and injuring its body. The power that erupted in that instant might have exceeded 1,500 points. The power value Anduin referred to was different from the magic power reserve. It wasn't just about having a high magic power value. The key to causing damage was the instantaneous output of magic power, along with the amplification of willpower and emotion. Anduin had previously tested his abilities with a special humanoid target. His maximum burst of instant damage was between 600 and 700 points, which is the extreme for a normal wizard. His body, tempered by lightning, was far superior to that of ordinary people. Combined with his firm will, the damage he could unleash was considerable. Physiologically, a wizard's magic power output channel has a limit. Unlike the magic value, which can widen with age, the output channel can atrophy, leading to decreased instantaneous magic power output. This is why some older wizards, despite having more magic power, seem weaker. Anduin was a wizard with extremely high attack power, but poor endurance. At his age, without the support of Phoenix Tears, he wouldn't have lasted as long. This time, his overload change almost half-energized his body, allowing his instantaneous mana output to break through to the extreme value. By absorbing electric charges, his total mana temporarily increased, and his determination for a desperate blow more than doubled the damage. He glanced at the rune snake's remains with lingering fear. The physical strength of this creature is outrageous. A normal person would have been vaporized by such an attack, but it managed to leave behind a body. It's simply unbelievable. At that moment, the Annihilation Sword, still embedded in the rune snake's body, erupted with a strong wave. The blade seemed to undergo a rebirth, shedding a layer of metal impurities. The sword looked the same, but felt different, exuding a peaceful and harmonious aura. Yet, the power it radiated was immense. It seems that after absorbing the magic power from the rune snake, Annihilation has transformed. I can feel its excitement. I believe it has now become a true, holy weapon. This battle was not in vain. Anduin looked at Desolation with joy on his face. The battle with the rune snake had been extremely challenging. The rune snake's overwhelming strength had nearly crushed him. Defeating the opponent was largely due to strategy, the support from Irene and Saul, and the rune snake's lack of tactical acumen. If their roles had been reversed, Anduin would likely have been defeated multiple times. It seemed that years of comfort had dulled the former duelist's combat skills. After a moment of reflection, Anduin struggled to straighten up and slowly moved forward to grasp the handle of Desolation's sword. As soon as he touched it, he felt a powerful energy surge from the sword into his body. He moaned, not in pain, but in comfort. The energy felt like a warm, soothing bath, enveloping his entire being. Along with the magic power, there was a significant amount of pure life energy. His body crackled with vitality, and his injuries healed almost instantly. He could even feel his body being strengthened in every aspect. His health, mana, and physical stamina were all increasing beyond their previous limits. This empowering sensation lasted for over a minute. The few intelligent creatures around could only watch in stunned silence. Anduin finally exhaled a comfortable breath after the energy transfer ceased. He took a moment to quietly assess the benefits of this strengthening. Physically, he felt much stronger. His speed, strength, and endurance had all increased by about 20%. This also translated to a direct increase in his magic power by 10%. Additionally, his mana reserves had expanded significantly. After a quick test, he found that his mana had surpassed 1,000 points, reaching 1083. Anduin was confident that among humans his age, he was likely the only one with such a high level of magic power. End of this chapter. Chapter 607, Treasure House and Oil Paintings. After evolving into a holy weapon, Destroyer seems to have undergone other changes. Apart from being able to absorb the magic power of the enemy, it seems that it doesn't even let go of life force and can feed back the excess energy to me. Anduin gently slid his finger across the sword's spine and couldn't help but sigh. Destroyer, aren't you forcing me to kill more people? Now you can probably be called a magic weapon. The sword responded with a dissatisfied clang, as if complaining that it wasn't its fault for the changes. You've got quite a temper now. Anduin shook his head mockingly. He flicked the sword, transforming it into a walking stick, and then looked at the rest of the group. All right, the process of hunting the rune snake had some twists and turns, but we successfully completed our goal. Now, let's take stock of our harvest. Suddenly, Anduin sniffed the air and glanced suspiciously at Thor and Irene. Hey, why does it smell like urine? Which one of you defecated everywhere again? Thor and Irene immediately shook their heads innocently, but Shaltir blushed. She had been so anxious that she forgot to change her pants. Fortunately, Anduin didn't dwell on the details and turned his attention back to the corpse of the rune snake. After a simple search, Anduin found that the spatial bag stored next to the rune snake hadn't been completely destroyed. He barely managed to open it and poured out the contents. The body of an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years was also a precious research material. After a brief inventory, there weren't many items in the space bag. Apart from a few bottles of elixirs and some daily-use potions, there wasn't a single galleon. Anduin wasn't too surprised. This guy lived at home, so he probably didn't carry a lot of supplies with him. The main treasures should be in the second basement of the rune snake's mansion. Although the manor had been razed before, it didn't damage the second basement at all. There should be a lot of treasures inside. Let's go. Let's explore the treasure house of the rune snake, Anduin said, leading the group to the center of the valley. Halfway through, he seemed to remember something and turned his head. By the way, remember the word snake residence, otherwise you won't be able to see that place. After Anduin uttered the word snake residence, Shaltir and the others suddenly saw a sunken foundation in the center of the valley. This place had been protected by the fidelity curse, and without the secret, it couldn't be seen. Anduin's ability to say this word calmly also meant that the rune snake was truly dead. Only after the original secret keeper dies can the rest of the people who know the position be automatically promoted to Secret Keeper. Shaltir and the others finally got a glimpse of the entire valley after learning the location information. They didn't expect there to be such a large manor here. The battle between Anduin and the rune snake had been so fierce that the whole house was almost leveled to the ground. The group followed Anduin and jumped down into the space that originally belonged to the basement. The materials here had been sucked into the sky by the gravitational spell, revealing the entrance to the lower layer. It wasn't because they were particularly sharp-eyed. It was mainly because the entrance was too conspicuous. A metal door on the ground like this probably meant the rune snake never thought of letting others into the basement, but the other party was cautious. Anduin noticed the protective magic arranged at the entrance. I'm going to take some time to break the protective spell on this door. Meanwhile, you two search around to see if there's anything valuable we might have missed. I remember there are a lot of Muggle artworks and some magical animals in the rune snake's house, he instructed, tilting his head towards his companions. Shaltir nodded immediately, then picked up her suitcase and ran off to the distance, eager to take this opportunity to change her pants. It didn't take Anduin long to unlock the magic locks at the entrance. Most of these protections were simple barriers with few traps or counterattacks, so he managed to crack them quickly. After opening the door, he walked in without waiting for anyone else. As soon as he entered the treasure house on the second basement floor, he found himself in a brightly lit hall. It looked no different from an ordinary reception room, except that the furniture and surrounding decorations were very luxurious and elegant. The only notable difference was the walls, which were covered with portraits. "Who are you? Are you Goodwin's new avatar?" A man in a wizard robe asked suspiciously from a large oil painting directly in front of the hall. Goodwin? Anduin guessed that this might be the real name of the rune snake. He shook his head resolutely. "No, if the Goodwin you are talking about is the rune snake, I have already killed him." The wizard in the oil painting sneered, clearly disbelieving. "You? Don't try to fool me, Goodwin. This isn't the first time you've tried to trick us. Poor thing." "Believe it or not," Anduin replied, ignoring the wizard's skepticism. He continued to observe the surroundings, noting that the layout was similar to that of the Silver Spear headquarters. There was a hall in the middle with doors in the left, middle, and right directions. Anduin turned his gaze back to the oil painting. "You've been here for a long time, right? What's behind these doors? Can you give me a brief introduction?" "Not even a hello, Goodwin? Is your memory getting worse?" The wizard in the oil painting gave Anduin a dissatisfied look. "My name is Beaumont Marchbanks. Have you forgotten your betrayal in the Silver Spear, you fool?" "Beaumont Marchbanks? The herbalist? You used to be a member of the Silver Spear?" Anduin asked, surprised. He had seen Beaumont's name before, but didn't expect to find his portrait here. "Humph, keep pretending you don't know me. You're a shameless person with a beastly face," Beaumont retorted, clearly disgusted with the rune snake. "So are you willing to introduce the rooms to me? If not, I'll explore them myself," Anduin said, showing no special courtesy. After all, this was just a portrait, not the real person. "Fine, I'll play along. I'm bored anyway," Beaumont snorted coldly. He glanced at the door on Anduin's left. "That's your refining room, where you make that forbidden potion." Then he looked at the door on the right. "That's your storage room, but there shouldn't be anything left in it. Didn't you transfer most of the materials to that broken organization? How dare you steal the name of the Silver Spear? It's a tarnish to the club." "As for the door next to me," Beaumont continued, looking straight at Anduin, "that's your private library. Besides this hall where you enjoy our insults, it's the place you stay the most." "You mean the rune snake often listens to you scolding him in this hall?" Anduin raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Is that guy a masochist?" "You're the masochist!" Beaumont snapped back. Beaumont glared at Anduin viciously. "I know what you're thinking. At first, you just hoped to get our forgiveness, but after realizing that we can't forgive you at all, it turned into a morbid enjoyment. You revel in the curses of the dead, constantly reassuring yourself that you are still alive. You are beyond repair, Goodwin." "Oh, so the portraits in this hall are all former members of the Silver Spear?" Anduin touched his chin amusedly. He then realized that these oil paintings seemed to serve no purpose for him. The reason why RuneSnake keeps them is probably what Beaumont said. To sum it up, living alone is boring, so having someone to chat with, even if they're just portraits, makes it bearable. Shaking his head helplessly, Anduin decided not to delve into the inner world of a psychopath. He turned and walked towards the door on the left. To his surprise, there seemed to be no protective magic on the second basement. Lore. He twisted the doorknob slightly and opened the door. The interior layout of the room was peculiar. In the center stood a high platform resembling an altar, at least tens of meters in radius. Residual bloodstains were still visible on the platform, and the thick scent of blood lingered in the air. Is this where the rune snakes make their elixirs? Anduin wondered aloud. He glanced around the high platform and noticed that the room's furnishings were surprisingly simple. Besides the high platform, there were 2 potion-making tables and a few cabinets for potion ingredients, but nothing else. Anduin strolled over to the potion operation table and carefully inspected it. He noticed a notebook spread out on the table. Picking it up, he couldn't help but complain. This is the formula for the elixir? Why would you leave it lying around so casually? Indeed, the notes in Anduin's hands contained the complete recipe for the snake slow potion. What the silver spear had worked so hard to obtain was treated like a cookbook thrown carelessly in the kitchen by the rune snake. Beaumont Marchbanks, a pioneer in herbalism, collected and catalogued many magical plants. He also appeared on the chocolate frog card. Beaumont is credited with discovering the role of gillgrass, but in fact, Elidora Ketteridge had discovered it about 100 years earlier. End of this chapter. Chapter 608, Life Refinement. After a brief search, Anduin finally uncovered the truth about the so-called snake slow potion. Strictly speaking, creating undead medicine is not as simple as merely brewing a potion. It involves 2 distinct parts, an alchemical ritual and the potion itself. The most crucial element is a ritual called life refinement, as recorded in the notes. During the ceremony, living creatures, from which life force needs to be extracted, are placed on an alchemical circle engraved with life refinement spells. The magic circle is then activated to extract vitality from the living body. This output, containing a large amount of life energy, is referred to as unstable life essence in the notes. After extracting this essence, it is used as the main raw material, with corresponding auxiliary materials added to formulate the so-called undead medicine. The notes also clearly state that the life essence extracted using this relatively crude magic circle has a certain degree of toxicity. Although the undead medicine made from this raw material can indeed extend life, it also causes some significant side effects, such as mutations after long-term use and the weakness associated with snake molting. This is because the magic power and life force in all magical creatures are influenced by emotions and will. These wills are not purified during the life refinement ritual, but contaminate the unstable life essence, forming a byproduct called mind toxin. Moreover, Anduin discovered that humans, as living beings, can indeed be used as raw materials for life refinement. However, intelligent beings like humans, due to their rich emotions, produce more mind toxins, resulting in poorer quality life essence. This is likely why the rune snake never considered using wizards to make the potion. Therefore, the so-called snake slow potion seemed to be a semi-finished product in Anduin's eyes. The original owner of the notes appeared dissatisfied with the efficacy of this elixir, expressing disdain. However, the original owner probably didn't anticipate that what he considered trash would become a treasure in the eyes of the rune snake and the members of the club. So this thing that looks like an altar is the so-called life formation circle? No wonder it has such a strong bloody smell, Anduin mused after a little research. He realized that the elixir was still a product of alchemy. Anduin had always avoided potions with obvious side effects and harm to nature, and now, seeing the hidden side effects, he was even more cautious. However, the knowledge contained within the notes intrigued Anduin. The so-called alchemy formation of life could significantly enrich his knowledge reserve and help him draw inferences for other studies. But at the same time, Anduin was worried about another matter. After his weapon, Desolation, evolved into a holy weapon, it seemed to have the ability to feed back the magic power and life force extracted from enemies to himself. Although the proportion of backfeeding was not substantial, Rune Snake, with his amazing physique and magic power, only added more than 200 points to Anduin's upper limit of magic power. It was still directly extracting life force from living beings. Anduin wondered if the energy fed back to him also contained the so-called mind toxin. If the records were accurate, could there be a hidden danger in his promotion from desolation? Anduin didn't want to become a being with an abnormal brain and body like the Rune Snake. However, when he received the magic power and life force fed back by desolation before, he didn't feel any difference. Those energies. Anduin had the impression that the materials he found were very pure. Although he wasn't planning to create the elixir of death, he felt the need to study the so-called life formation array in depth. He wanted to compare the unstable life essence with the one he obtained from the destroyer to see if the energy was consistent. Anduin sensed that the life energy transformed by extinction was likely much more advanced than the life essence produced through the life refining ceremony. Perhaps he could even upgrade the life refining array to a higher quality. However, these studies would have to wait. For now, he needed to take stock of his findings. Anduin didn't linger in the room any longer. He had already obtained the blueprint of the magic circle and would find a way to transport the ready-made magic circle later. After leaving the room on the left, he walked straight to the room on the right of the entrance. According to Beaumont in the portrait, this was the warehouse of the Rune Snake. Upon entering, Anduin was greeted by hundreds of beautifully carved wooden shelves, most of which were empty. As Beaumont had mentioned, many materials had likely been transferred to the club's warehouse. Anduin carefully inspected the shelves and found more than a dozen bottles of finished elixirs, enough to last several years. It seemed the Rune Snake had kept some resources for themselves. On other shelves, there were numerous magical animal byproducts, including fur, bones, and teeth, which could be measured in tons. These were likely stripped from animals after the life refining process. Many of the furs looked dull and lifeless, but upon closer inspection, Anduin found that while the raw materials weren't as high quality as those directly stripped, they were still usable for producing alchemy props. Additionally, there were various magical animal resources on the shelves, but overall, the collection was sparse. There were no gold galleons or high-quality alchemy materials. The items here are much less than expected. It seems the main stash is still at the headquarters. After cleaning up here, we'll head to the Silver Spear headquarters, Anduin said, shaking his head helplessly before exiting the room. By this time, Shaltir and the others had entered the basement and were waiting quietly in the hall. "My lord, everything above has been completely destroyed. I didn't find any Muggle artworks, but there were quite a few magical animals still alive, stunned on the edge of the valley. They probably didn't have time to escape. I've collected them all in the suitcase," Shaltir reported with a smile. "Very good. There are a large number of magical animal byproducts in the room behind me. Transport them all to warehouse number 3 in the experimental building. There should be enough space there," Anduin instructed, pointing to the room behind him. As Shaltir prepared to follow his orders, a sudden exclamation came from the side. "How could there be vampires and magical animals? Are you really not Goodwin?" Beaumont in the portrait stared at Anduin and his party in disbelief. "It's none of your business. Your broken painting was left in this ghost place by the Rune Snake, so you must not be a good thing," Shaltir retorted. She then turned to Anduin and asked, "My lord, should we set these portraits on fire?" Anduin shook his head. "Let these portraits decide for themselves. Although they are just paintings, they represent famous people from hundreds of years ago. Let's give them some last respect." "Goodwin is dead! Goodwin is dead!" Beaumont shouted excitedly, not paying attention to what Anduin and the others were saying. The commotion instantly awakened the rest of the portraits in the hall. These magical portraits began conversing animatedly, seemingly sharing the joy in their hearts. "My lord, it seems we have been ignored," Shaltir muttered, looking at the chattering portraits with a hint of exasperation. "Then let's ignore them as well," Anduin chuckled. Go ahead and start your work. Meet me in the room in the middle once you're done. Without paying further attention to the noisy portraits, Anduin entered the room directly facing the entrance, his goal clear in his mind. This private library of the Rune Snake was significantly larger than the other two rooms, likely expanded from the inside using the no-trace stretching charm. The bookshelves extended beyond the visible borders, filled with an eclectic mix of materials. After a brief search, Anduin discovered that the library's contents were quite varied. A large portion consisted of various newspapers and periodicals from the past century. The shelves also held numerous entertainment books from the Muggle world, including world classics and even gossip magazines from different countries. Additionally, there were a wide range of wizarding books, including autobiographies, travel notes, and even recipes. It seemed that the Rune Snake, having lived for hundreds of years, relied on these books to pass the time. Anduin spent several hours in the library, later joined by Shaltir. Together, they roughly categorized the books into several groups: useless, Muggle entertainment, wizarding books, maybe useful wizarding newspapers, not very useful academic journals from various years, and useful magical materials. After sorting, Anduin realized that the collection was quite extensive, with the useful category alone filling dozens of bookshelves. During their sorting, Anduin stumbled upon the personal notes of the Rune Snake, contained in 6 large boxes. Most of these notes were diaries, recording a significant amount of club-related content. However, the personal magical research that Anduin was most interested in was sparse. Unlike talented wizards such as Phoenix and Thunderbird, the Rune Snake had almost no original magical research of her own. Most of the magic she excelled at was learned from others, including the gravity spell that Anduin found particularly intriguing. End of this chapter. Chapter 609. Essence of Qingcrit Technique. Gravity Art is a magic that can directly manipulate gravity. After carefully reviewing the relevant information, Anduin discovered that it has an extremely complex rune structure, making it extremely difficult to learn. Anduin, who is proficient in spells, found that the underlying runes of gravity are also control, indicating that this gravitational magic is a high-level variant of the control system. To learn this kind of magic, one must have at least instinct-level proficiency in control system magic, making the entry threshold exceptionally high. Of course, this kind of challenge is nothing to Anduin. After more than 10 minutes of research, he could easily control the gravity around him, allowing himself to float calmly in mid-air. Gravity is somewhat similar to an evolved version of the levitation curse. It suits me very well, but its direction of action is not just upwards. It also has a very high conversion efficiency for magic power. With further research, we can engrave it into the flying cloak, potentially raising my speed to another level, Anduin mused, satisfied with the gravity spell. With his proficiency in control magic, a little practice would make it a staple in his repertoire. After studying the content of the gravity art, Anduin took out an exquisitely crafted thread-bound book from the personal information box of the Rune Snake. This book was very different from the other Western-style books in the library, both in terms of paper and binding method, giving Anduin a sense of ancient Chinese books. The words on it were actually very familiar to him, traditional Chinese characters. The essence of Qingwan's secret art? Is this a Huaguo magic book? Anduin caressed the cover of the ancient book carefully. The Rune Snake had specially used a beautifully decorated small box to keep it, indicating its importance. As Anduin gently opened the ancient book, he found a piece of yellowed parchment under the cover, showing its long history. Anduin picked up the parchment and saw that it was a diary written in ancient runes, detailing how the Rune Snake acquired the book. Today, the club met a powerful challenger who called himself Chen, an oriental wizard traveling through Europe. We were very interested in him. Beaumont volunteered to challenge him to a duel and lost completely. The other members and I felt a little embarrassed. It's unreasonable to let a stranger defeat us in Europe. But after successive challenges, we were all overwhelmed by the power of Chen. The magic he used was unheard of. Even when fighting all of us simultaneously, he still held his ground. He could clone himself and cast spells. I couldn't bear the humiliation of this fiasco and proposed to Beaumont to use the Avada Kedavra to attack Chen, but Beaumont objected to my shameless act, saying that no one stipulated that the silver spear must be the winner of the duel. I felt very ashamed about this. Perhaps the long-term victories had given me such dark thoughts. So I took the initiative to apologize to Chen, but he was very kind, at least outside of the duel. Because of this encounter, a few of us formed a friendship with Chen. He told us that in his hometown, they pursue secret education and pay great attention to succession. His Qingyuan Academy of Secret Arts is almost in an isolated space called the Secret Realm, which is why we are so unfamiliar with the magic he uses. And Chen is very disgusted with this overly closed way of inheritance. To change the status quo, he left his sect. That's what he called his magic school. After leaving the East, he began to travel. For many years, he took the initiative to learn unique magic from other wizards and eventually mastered them all. Chen said that his ideal was to return to the East and open a magic school without sectarianism after years of studying abroad. In the East, they call magic secret arts. Everyone, including me, was moved by Chen's lofty ideals. After a discussion, we decided to open the club's collection to Chen and teach him the mysteries contained in Western magic. In response to our generosity, Chen was deeply moved and left the essence of Qingyuan secret art as a gift in return. During that time, we exchanged magical experiences with Chen, and everyone gained a lot. It was also the happiest time I had in the club. Because of this, I admire and am obsessed with the magic left by Chen. However, his secret magic is so profound that most people in the club can't even understand it. To learn it, they even spent a lot of time learning Chinese. I know that compared to others in the club, my talents are quite limited. If I didn't rely on the family magic of gravity, I wouldn't even be able to join the Silver Spear. But because of this clear understanding, I am willing to spend more time learning. After mastering one of the magics in the essence of secret arts, I have a different view on the Snake Slow potion. If I have it, can I eliminate the side effects of the elixir to the greatest extent? Goodwin Nicholas. After reading this note, which seemed like a conversation with himself, Anduin finally understood the source of the strange magic in the hands of the rune snake. It turned out that these magics were all imported and did not originate locally. Apart from the gravity spell, the rest of the magic of the rune snake likely comes from this essence of Qingyuan secret art. This realization made Anduin more interested in the contents of this essence of the mystic arts. Nodding silently, Anduin couldn't wait to read the content of this ancient book. Both the pictures and the text were in Chinese characters, but Anduin, who was Chinese in his previous life, found it easier to read than English. Among some of the pages of the book, there were also sticky notes from the rune snake, filled with his notes and annotations. It was clear that the other party had put a lot of effort into studying the content. Sure enough, in this essence of Qingyuan, Anduin saw many spells that he had seen used by the rune snake or the club. For example, the shuttle curse that Anduin used to drill through the wall before comes from this magic book. However, in the essence, it is called Earthwalk, and its function is to let the caster freely move through solids such as soil and rocks. At the same time, the essence also recorded a water walking technique, which allows the caster to move freely in the water without being affected by resistance. Moreover, Anduin discovered that the secret arts in the essence do not have special requirements for spells and spellcasting actions, which is very different from the European magic world. Even for a wizard like Anduin, who is highly sensitive to magic power, when he first learns magic, he must follow the standard spells and gestures to complete the spellcasting. In addition to consuming mana, learning these secret techniques also requires a strong body and a peaceful heart. For beginners, a certain amount of handprints will be used to complete the spell. Is the content in this area called Heaven and Man as One? Physical fitness and meditation, isn't this the way I figured out to exercise magic sensitivity? At this moment, Anduin realized that the training method he had developed over the years before he was exposed to magic seemed to be very consistent with the core practices in the essence of Qingyuan secret art. So the practice of Oriental magic requires a certain level of magic sensitivity from the very beginning? It seems they don't use magic wands, which are auxiliary spellcasting items. From the outset, they focus on casting spells without wands. No wonder they are so powerful, Anduin mused, piecing together the few written records he had found. He could imagine the development and spellcasting habits of wizards or mystics in his distant homeland. This made him even more interested in the spells contained in the essence. As he continued to scroll down, Anduin's eyes lit up again upon discovering another spras, Ekret technique. The fitness technique is an auxiliary secret art practice method with 2 stages. The first stage involves steadily increasing one's magic power reserve and magic sensitivity through physical exercise and controlled breathing. The content recorded here was almost identical to Anduin's training method. However, what intrigued him even more was the second stage of the fitness technique. Once the magic power reserves and sensitivity reach a certain level, the control and perception of magic power are strengthened. The practitioner can then guide the magic power to temper and enhance their body using the method recorded in the essence, thereby improving overall physical strength. With prolonged practice, the practitioner's strength, speed, endurance, resistance to blows, and flexibility will be greatly enhanced. Eventually, they may even acquire some incredible abilities, such as bone shrinkage, a steel-like body, and the ability to stretch and soften their body to a certain extent. Seeing this, Anduin immediately recalled the many magical abilities the rune snake had demonstrated. For instance, the rune snake could instantly twist and change directions while moving like a snake. Its body was harder than steel, impervious even to the full-strength god Me/. Additionally, when he was at the headquarters of the Silver Spear, the fire ash snake had rescued the poisonous leopard with incredible speed. The rune snake had controlled the snake molt from a very early age and had been adopted as a loyal dog, making it unsurprising that it had been taught this fitness technique. It was likely that the speed of the ash snake was also enhanced by the fitness technique. End of this chapter. Chapter 610, The 3 Cleansing Curses. Anduin took a deep breath, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I didn't expect such a magical technique. The second stage of this secret art feels very similar to the lightning tempering I experienced before, but the fitness technique makes this process controllable and active. He stared intently at the content of the essence, realizing the profound significance of mastering this secret. It would not only enhance his strength, but also improve his training methods. Compared to other high-difficulty magics, the fitness technique might be revolutionary for the wizarding world, Anduin mused, nodding to himself. However, he quickly tempered his enthusiasm with a dose of reality. But this isn't necessarily the case. Both the fitness technique and my training method require rigorous and hard training. Given the current atmosphere in the wizarding world, many wizards might not be willing to endure such hardships. In the end, only those who can discipline themselves will benefit. Anduin acknowledged that the real situation might be more complex than he imagined, but he decided not to concern himself with others' affairs. He only needed to focus on his own progress. With this in mind, he turned his attention back to the other secret arts recorded in the essence. Techniques like earth-walking art and water-walking art were also highly practical. Next, Anduin examined 2 secret arts he had previously encountered with the rune snake, Mysterious Snake and Spiritual Shield. The introduction to Mysterious Snake was straightforward. It was an attack spell where the conjured magic snake could carry part of the caster's consciousness and characteristics, making it more powerful and easier to control. This spell was particularly effective when combined with techniques like the tracking curse, often yielding twice the result with half the effort. Additionally, the magic power conversion rate for this spell was very high. The magic power conversion rate was a term Anduin had developed himself. It represented how much magic power could be converted into effective magic for every point of magic power used to cast a spell. Several factors influenced this rate, including magic power sensitivity and the caster's proficiency with the spell. Essentially, the more sensitive one was to magic power, and the more proficient they were with a spell, the higher the efficiency of converting magic power into effective magic. Typically, the conversion rate for ordinary wizards was below 1. A rate of 0.6 was considered acceptable, 0.7 was very good, and a rate of 0.8 indicated a high degree of proficiency. Achieving a rate above 0.9 was nearly impossible due to inherent losses in the spellcasting process. Even Anduin himself could only achieve a conversion rate of about 0.95 when using wild minds, thanks to his body being tempered by lightning. For other complex spells like the levitating curse, his conversion rate was close to 0.9. A high magic power conversion rate indicated the integrity of the spellcasting, but did not directly correlate to the spell's power. For instance, a bright curse with a conversion rate of 0.9 would not be as powerful as an Avada Kedavra with a conversion rate of 0.5. However, a higher conversion rate meant the spell was more energy efficient and easier to control. To achieve the same effect with a spell, a higher conversion rate was advantageous. The mysterious snake spell, with its high conversion rate, was particularly efficient and easy to control. The learning threshold for this spell is high, but once mastered, the initial conversion rate can reach approximately 0.7. This indicates that it is a spell with both a high minimum and maximum potential. After studying for a while, Anduin raised his hand and summoned a pale silver and blue-lit mystic snake. The snake's intertwined body floated around Anduin with remarkable flexibility, almost as if it were alive. "It's a pity that Wild Thunder is more compatible with me. I'm afraid this spell will end up gathering dust, but it still holds research value. Perhaps I can develop a secret thunder snake based on it," Anduin mused. After playing with the mystic snake for a while, he dispersed it and turned his attention to another spell, Spiritual Shield. Spiritual Shield is the same type of magic shield that Anduin had previously used, which the rune snake could not break. Its operating principle is straightforward. As long as the magic power reserve is not exhausted, the spiritual shield will persist and resist all incoming magical attacks. It also offers protection against various damage types such as shock absorption, high and low temperature resistance, puncture, and sonic impact. Essentially, as long as there is enough magic power, this is the most perfect protective magic. However, the magic power consumed by Spiritual Shield increases with the type of attack. For instance, an attack that normally consumes 100 points of magic power might consume 150 points if it includes both fire and shock damage. The stronger the vibration or the greater the temperature difference, the higher the energy consumption. The spirit pattern on the surface of the spiritual shield also consumes energy when absorbing vibrations, extreme temperatures, and sound waves, so it does have an upper limit in defense. The factors that affect the defense threshold, as well as the strength of other spells, include the caster's willpower, emotions, and spellcasting proficiency. Anduin realized that he might not be able to break through this magic shield. This made him even more curious about the magic power reserves of the rune snake, as his tests showed that the spiritual shield consumed more energy than he had anticipated. If Anduin used the spiritual shield in battle, he would likely deplete his mana and break the shield in less than 3 minutes. However, the rune snake could maintain it for much longer without any issues, which was simply unimaginable. It's another outrageously strong magic, but it's not suitable for me. With my current mana reserve, using the spiritual shield in battle would be suicidal. Perhaps only an old monster like the rune snake can use it as normal magic, Anduin thought, shaking his head helplessly. He realized that if he wanted to use this secret technique, he would have to find another way. After testing these 2 spells, Anduin continued to delve into the essence of the secrets and came across 2 magics that intrigued him the most: Separation Body Technique and Sanqing Mantra. The Separation Body Technique is a summoning spell similar to Anduin's Flying Crow technique, but its intensity is much higher compared to the Flock of Birds magic. Like other occult arts, this one also has very strict learning conditions. Anduin noted that these occult arts are difficult to learn and master, which likely means that the number of wizards proficient in occult arts in the East is quite limited. First of all, practicing the clone art requires a very high magic sensitivity. Otherwise, the created clone might be defective. Secondly, one must have the ability to multitask, as clones inherit the senses of the original body. If the level of multitasking is insufficient, it could lead to mental disturbances. Even if one masters these two conditions, a high level of proficiency is still required. In this secret technique, the magic power conversion rate must reach a certain level before it can be used effectively in combat. Otherwise, the energy consumption will be excessively high. For instance, if Anduin's clone technique has a conversion rate of only 0.5, a clone created with 50 points of magic power will only have 10 points of magic power. Alternatively, if he wants to create 100 clones with 5 points of magic power each, he might only be able to create a fraction of that number. Fortunately, Anduin met all the requirements for practicing clone body art, so he mobilized nearly 100 points of magic power and created a clone. As soon as the clone appeared, Anduin immediately felt an tonal perception of himself. This sensation was quite magical, akin to playing a game with two first-person perspectives. However, the created clone only had 40 points of magic power, indicating that Anduin's proficiency in the clone technique was still lacking. In fact, even Shaltir, Sol, and Irene in the room, or even Hog's dog, could easily defeat the clone with physical force. This magic feels powerful but ultimately useless, Anduin muttered, shaking his head in frustration. Moving past the secret body art, Anduin turned his attention to the last secret art in the essence of the secret art, the Sangqing mantra, which allows the rune snake to split into 3 physical clones. The name Sangqing mantra is derived from the allusion to Lao Tzu's transformation into the 3 pure ones. This magic can create 2 clones with permanent physical forms, which behave like real people, complete with physiological needs such as eating, drinking, and other bodily functions. These clones also possess the ability to act autonomously. Despite the term curse in its name, the Sangqing mantra is not a curse but a highly complex magical ritual. There are specific prerequisites for practicing the Sangqing mantra. One must take a potion called Distraction Potion, which enhances the user's brain response and allows the wizard to multitask for extended periods. The primary ingredient for this potion is the egg of the rune snake. This might be why the rune snake adopted such a code name, or it could be because the rune snake has 3 heads, corresponding to the wizard and the 2 clones. The essence of the secret art strictly records that taking the distraction potion is mandatory for learning the Sangqing mantra. Attempting to create a clone without the potion can lead to severe, unpredictable consequences, such as schizophrenia or the emergence of a new, independent consciousness in the clone that gradually defies the will of the original body. End of this chapter. Chapter 611, Closing, Seeking a Recommended Monthly Ticket. After taking the distraction potion, you can attempt to create a clone. Note that this involves crafting rather than casting a spell. In fact, this type of clone is more akin to an alchemical artifact than a magical entity. The first step in creating the doppelganger is selecting the materials. The primary raw material is the wizard's body, which must be alive, have intact limbs, and an undamaged brain. Beyond these prerequisites, the quality of the raw materials will also determine the quality of the final clone. The stronger the wizard's body, the stronger the clone will be. This might explain why someone would target Thunderbird's physical potential, aiming to use it for a new clone. Once the materials are selected, the next step is to clear the individual consciousness. A common method is to use a large number of memory-erasing spells on the recipient. Additionally, notes left by the rune snake suggest that a potion called low-energy potion could be used, with the formula provided. This potion can directly turn the user into an idiot. After removing the wizard's consciousness, the next step is to prepare a nutritional potion according to the method in the Sangqing mantra. The preparation of this potion is not difficult, requiring only some common herbs and the wizard's blood. Once prepared, the wizard's body should be washed and soaked in the potion for 7 days. During these 7 days, the main body wizard must cast a spell on the clone wizard 3 times a day. This spell is the true mantra. The Sangqing mantra is somewhat similar to the magic of spiritual connection. The nutrient solution strengthens the life connection between the clone and the main body, while continuous spellcasting strengthens the spiritual connection. After 7 days of soaking and spellcasting, the main body wizard should be able to sense the existence and consciousness of the clone. However, the final step is crucial: magic injection. Magic injection involves infusing magic power into the clone to restore the wizard's ability to cast spells. The amount of magic required depends on the clone wizard's original physique. The stronger the original body, the more mana needs to be infused. After infusion, a physical clone is considered complete. However, it should be noted that the clone will have a strong spiritual and even physical connection with the main body, almost like a blood connection. The clone will gradually resemble the main body in size and appearance. If the physical clone is destroyed, it will cause severe damage to the main body, both physically and spiritually, making the main body feel the pain of being torn apart. Therefore, once a clone is made, it must be protected as much as possible. Otherwise, not only will one's strength not be enhanced, but the clone could also become a liability. A physical avatar that doesn't require sharing the magic power reserve with the main body? This kind of magic seems very suitable for someone like me who doesn't have enough magic power reserves, but the idea of infusing my consciousness into someone else's body feels a bit nauseating. Anduin rubbed his chin and muttered. Although he was very interested in this magic, he wasn't overly eager. He planned to study the principles of this magic more thoroughly before considering whether to practice it. After all, this kind of physical avatar not only enhances the wizard, but also adds weaknesses. Instead of hastily copying and using it, it might be better to think about whether there is a way to overcome these drawbacks. In addition, this kind of magic gave him a strange feeling. Perhaps Anduin could find a better development method in the future, such as creating non-living body clones. This might be a more appropriate way of thinking. After researching the essence of Clear Origin's secret art, Anduin put it away carefully. Except for fitness art, earth-walking art, and water-walking art, none of the other secret techniques were very suitably for him. At least, they could only be used after some improvement. After completing the simple search, Anduin directed Shaltir to empty the entire library. When he came to the hall outside, the portraits led by Beaumont had a complete change in their attitude towards Anduin. After asking the opinions of these portraits, they all expressed their willingness to follow Anduin. After all, neither they nor their original masters were persecuted by the rune snakes. Anduin's removal of the rune snake was equivalent to avenging them. Now, letting them follow Anduin was also equivalent to giving them a chance to repay their favor. Anduin didn't have much opinion on this. These portraits themselves didn't need to consume any resources, so it was okay to keep them as a form of entertainment. However, after a brief understanding, Anduin found that the origins of these portraits were significant. They were basically famous wizards from 2 centuries ago. Although they were only portraits, they also possessed a lot of the experience and knowledge of their original selves. For example, Beaumont, as a pioneer of European herbal medicine in the 18th century, was familiar with the efficacy and cultivation methods of various herbs, making him an intelligent herbal medicine consultant. After discovering this, Anduin suddenly found these portraits much more pleasing to the eye. After evacuating the entire Runesnake Manor, Anduin did not hesitate and immediately took Shaltir and the others to the secret room where the Black Mirror was stored. Then he himself changed into the appearance of Golden Snidget and returned. The Fire Ash Snake, who was still at the headquarters, didn't notice Anduin's abnormality at all. So, after fooling the other party with a few words, Anduin easily found a chance to backstab the Fire Ash Snake. The Silver Gun, who had been like a puppet of the Niven Snake for many years, finally ended his life with a puzzled expression on his face. In fact, Anduin had read the diary of the Rune Snake and learned that the Rune Snake kept and taught the Fire Ash Snake fitness art because he wanted to keep a spare clone for himself. From the beginning, the Fire Ash Snake was regarded as a consumable in the eyes of the Rune Snake. Anduin also considered whether to keep the Fire Ash Snake and make it his physical clone before making a move. But on one hand, Anduin felt that the clone production method in Sangching Mantra was a bit disgusting. He didn't have the habit of infusing his own consciousness into other people's bodies, as it could have some negative influence on himself. On the other hand, because of the identity of the fire ash snake, he was a person who had taken the elixir. Keeping him meant that he needed to be provided with the elixir. But after understanding the cause and effect of the elixir, Anduin found it quite disgusting and didn't want to raise a weird undead. However, it was still possible to use the body of the ash snake to study the effect of fitness technique. Anduin knew that the rune snake had taught him the fitness technique about 20 years ago. After testing, the total mana value of the fire ash snake was about 3,000 points. In addition, the fire ash snake was from the same era as the Thunderbird. That meant, in the past 20 years, the fire ash snake had increased its magic power by about 1,000 points using the fitness technique, with an average of 50 points per year. Although this number was not much, it was definitely significant. After all, in addition to this, the fitness technique also strengthened his physique. When Anduin backstabbed the ash snake, he could feel the damping effect from Destroyer. Once the fire ash snake was completely dealt with, the core of the entire Silver Spear organization was essentially eradicated. The remaining members, such as the deformed lizards, black dragons, and other creatures that had taken the undead medicine, were left without the elixir supply from their headquarters, effectively sentencing them to death within a few months. As for the lesser three, TS, once the main forces were gone, they posed no significant danger. However, the Silver Spear's misfortune didn't end there. While searching the headquarters, Anduin discovered a file in Ash Snake's bedroom containing detailed information on the organization's operatives in various countries. Even if Anduin had wanted to let them go, he had no choice but to hand this material over to Andre. Given its international implications, it might involve the International Wizarding Association, but these were not Anduin's concerns. He was now happily indulging in the thrill of treasure hunting. The materials and magical items stored at the Silver Spear headquarters were not only abundant but also highly valuable. This made Anduin feel as though the headquarters was as wealthy as Niven Snake Manor. It was no wonder, considering that the Rune Snake's stores were mostly personal items, while the headquarters warehouse held the club's reserve resources. In the material warehouse, Anduin found at least 30,000 galleons in cash. Additionally, there were several kilograms of precious ulam steel and Aesir mithril, with other magical metals measured in tons. There was also a significant amount of magic gel used to make Silver Spear gun masks, and a full pound of the even rarer refined mithril. This was the first time Anduin had seen such a large piece of refined mithril. He also found 2 one-ounce packages of lamé. Refined mithril is even rarer than magical alloy, and so far, he had only obtained one from Thunderbird. Besides hard currencies like cash and magical alloys, there were also various valuable wizarding items, including finished potions, materials, and parts from magical animals, such as hair, skin, teeth, bones, and feathers. Anduin had long coveted the moon-crazy beast carpet that covered the entire reception room at the headquarters. It was a subtle yet extravagant display of wealth. In addition to these raw materials, there were numerous finished products, alchemy props like door keys and black mirrors, and everyday items such as clothes, food, and alcohol, all piled up in boxes. The club had clearly made extensive preparations for emergencies. Anduin's haul from the magic materials warehouse was also substantial. Although many materials overlapped with those in the Rune Snake's library, there were still some new items. Moreover, all the materials were meticulously cataloged in the headquarters database, saving Anduin a lot of time when searching. Anduin, along with Shaltir, Thor, Irene, and Hog, who joined later, spent 2 full days moving and cataloging everything from the Silver Spear headquarters. He was thorough, dismantling everything from the magic circle used to create door keys to the portal connecting the headquarters to the outside world and packing it all into suitcases. Anduin's principle was simple. If it looked valuable, he took it, regardless of its immediate usefulness. This habit of thriftiness ensured that he left no stone unturned. The materials are worth between 2 galleons, so it is natural to find a way to earn more at this time. After even those obsidian floor tiles were pried away, the entire Silver Spear headquarters no longer had the solemn and grand feeling it used to have. Instead, it looked like a rough, polished basement. Looking at the scene in front of him, Anduin finally breathed a sigh of relief. The Silver Spear incident has finally come to an end. Let's withdraw. It will take a long time just to digest this harvest. Are you really agreeing to Director Andre's request to stay in Germany for another 6 months? Shaltair asked curiously, stretching her arms in a relaxed manner. That's right. Germany is still in a state of rebuilding. Putting all these burdens on Andre alone is indeed a bit unfair to him. However, during my time in Germany, I will not intervene too much in specific government affairs. We are foreigners after all, so we have to avoid suspicion. Anduin replied with a slight smile. He then added, in addition, Andre arranged for me to be an all-roar training instructor, so I can use this time to test some new alchemy equipment on those aurors. At the same time, I also have a lot of new ideas about training methods, and I can test them on them. Hey, then they are in for some tough times. Hogg grinned sinisterly, then asked curiously, so, after half a year, what is our follow-up plan? Return to England directly? Britain is a must. Now that we have research materials, the Longbottom couple's treatment plan is also on the research agenda. Additionally, the content of tactical training needs to be summarized, organized, and published. There are also many matters in the Silver Flash Commercial Bank that need timely attention, Anduin explained. However, Anduin paused. Even so, we can't stay in England for too long. First, we must go to the United States to send that Thunderbird back to its homeland. On the other hand, I need to find Soul's clansmen to see if I can sign a blood contract with the Thunderbird clan. Moreover, if Silver Flash Commercial Bank wants to open up more overseas markets, we must visit each country in person. Otherwise, we might encounter situations like we did in Germany. We can also take this opportunity to get a good look at the magical customs of various countries. In short, Anduin looked into the void in front of him, his eyes seemingly out of focus, and smiled as if he could see through space. I'm afraid we won't be able to relax in the next few years. The German chapter has come to an end here. Since many readers really want to see the protagonist returning to Hogwarts, the next chapter will directly jump to a few years later. Anduin's adventures in the wizarding world over the past few years will be presented in the form of memories and dialogues in the following plots. I hope everyone will continue to like and support this book. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 of 12, 3 years later, seeking a monthly pass recommendation ticket. It had been more than 3 years since the schism of the German Ministry of Magic, an event that had shocked the international wizarding world. The time was now June 1991. In the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall sat across from the principal's desk, looking intently at the old man before her. She involuntarily pulled a few candies from the plate in front of her and stuffed them into her mouth. "Albus, have you really made up your mind?" she asked. "Didn't I already ask everyone's opinions on this decision at the school staff meeting? At that time, none of you expressed any objection," Dumbledore replied, pushing his half-moon glasses up his nose and smiling gently. "Except for Severus, of course. Minerva, you should have heard that not only Durmstrang and Beauxbatons in Europe, but even the Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the United States have considered setting up a special training school. According to our verification, the training method recorded in tactical training can indeed improve a wizard's magic sensitivity. Hogwarts shouldn't be left behind, right? After all, the founder who invented this training method came from us." Dumbledore popped a handful of sweets into his mouth as he spoke. "You know that's not what I mean," McGonagall retorted, giving Dumbledore a stern look. "Of course, there's nothing wrong with offering training courses that benefit all students, but the question is, are you really going to ask him to come back and teach the class himself? Is there any problem? I remember when he was in school you liked him very much." Dumbledore looked curiously at his old friend. "Of course, there's nothing wrong with him, and I am still proud of having taught such an outstanding student," McGonagall admitted, a small smile playing on her lips. But the problem is his identity. McGonagall's expression turned serious. You know exactly what his reputation is in the international wizarding world. Not to mention, he recently won the International Wizarding Duel Championship. Even now, he is an Auror training consultant for the Ministry of Magic in many countries, an equipment supplier, a senior researcher at the International Alchemy Research Center, and the founder of Tactical Training. He's seen as a pioneer of a new school, practically another young Dumbledore in the eyes of outsiders. She glanced at Dumbledore with a face full of complaints. Don't blame me for not reminding you, but do you think a busy man like him can be easily invited back to Hogwarts as a professor? Don't get rejected by him and end up with your old face being unbearable. Ha! Dumbledore chuckled. Minerva, it's heartening to see you care about me so much, but your worries are unnecessary. Indeed, as you said, his current achievements are brilliant. Sometimes I can't help but marvel at how far he has come. But it is precisely because he is so exceptional that Hogwarts needs him more. Dumbledore sighed with some melancholy. You know the state of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. It's hard to recruit a decent teacher for even a year. If this continues, the students of Hogwarts will fall behind those of other magic schools. As for whether I can really invite him back, I am confident. I believe the conditions I offer will be compelling enough. So, you want him back not only as a training professor, but also to make up for the shortcomings caused by the decline in the quality of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class? McGonagall asked. Exactly, Dumbledore confirmed, his eyes twinkling with determination. McGonagall nodded thoughtfully. This is indeed a good idea. He has always had a knack for managing students. I still remember the changes he brought to the colleges in the 2 years before he graduated, although things have reverted now. However, McGonagall still had some doubts. Even if this is the case, is it really necessary to invite him back in person? It seems that inviting an Auror trained by him could solve the problem. She looked at Dumbledore suspiciously. Have you heard any strange rumors recently that make you so interested in him? Perhaps a prophecy from a divination professor? He. You don't always have to be prejudiced against Trelawney, Minerva. She is actually doing a good job in her position, Dumbledore said, shaking his head with a smile. You're right. Do you mean the way she always predicts the death of students every year? McGonagall couldn't help but give him a blank look. If it's because of that, I don't think it should be so grand. Minerva, Dumbledore suddenly looked at McGonagall with some seriousness. That boy will also be enrolled next school year. He needs him. McGonagall was taken aback by Dumbledore's words and could only shake her head helplessly. Well, I can't argue with you. Anyway, you just have to know. After finishing the conversation, Professor McGonagall thoughtfully left the principal's office. Dumbledore, however, looked preoccupied. He slowly paced to the window, looking at the young wizards below the tower who were celebrating the approaching end of the term. I'm afraid your good days are coming to an end, Dumbledore said softly, looking at the children with a hint of sadness. He then remembered the rumor McGonagall had mentioned. I'm sorry, Minerva. As I get older, I tend to become superstitious. Thinking of this, Dumbledore couldn't help but mutter the prophecy he had heard before. The blessing of the 7th star of the Big Dipper will lead the Savior to explore the darkness, and will the silver lightning finally pierce the night sky? After muttering, Dumbledore's eyes became firm again. He then apparated away. When Dumbledore reappeared, he was in the crowded Diagon Alley. He headed straight into a bustling business house. I finally understand why Minerva used the word grand to describe him, Dumbledore thought as he looked up at the Silver Flash Trading Company. The store had expanded to thousands of square meters, but was still crowded with all kinds of goods. Inside the Silver Flash Trading Company, pleasant melodious music played, and colorful lights and shadows of magical animals hovered in the sky, creating the atmosphere of a small magical zoo. Nearly 100 wizards, full of smiles, moved back and forth between counters filled with strange alchemy props. They discussed the latest items in the store or carefully selected their favorite records at the record counter. Some people could be seen wandering in the store every day, enjoying the music and air conditioning without buying anything. Is this scene only in the off-season? It's hard to imagine what it will look like after those little ones go on summer vacation, Dumbledore thought with a little emotion. He then headed straight to the innermost counter. At the counter, a husky in a tuxedo was nimbly counting accounts for the customers. Even the regulars always wondered how his dog paws were so proficient at operating the cash register. "Hog," Dumbledore called out, not wanting to interrupt the busy dog, but knowing he might have to wait until the store closed if he didn't. "Woof." Hog, startled by the call, looked up from his work. From the side, Hog grinned. "Principal Dumbledore, what brings you here today?" "I'm not on vacation, sorry. I'm too busy to come out and greet you properly." "It's okay," Dumbledore replied, smiling at Hog's endearing demeanor. "I'm here to find Anduin. Is he in the shop today?" "Yes, sir. He's meeting guests on the third, but they're all people you know. Please wait a moment, and I'll have someone take you up to see him," Hog responded quickly. He then turned and called out, "Ibrahimovic! Ibrahimovic! Where are you? Coming! Coming!" Ibrahimovic, who had graduated over a year ago, still appeared shy. He hurried over, holding a box of alchemy amulets. "You kid, why are you still so timid after being with the company for more than a year? Didn't you see Principal Dumbledore come in? You should know how to greet him. Take the principal to the office on the third floor, and be quick about it." Hog barked, pointing at Ibrahimovic like a boss giving orders to a subordinate. "You were the one who asked me to go into the warehouse to restock." Ibrahimovic muttered, feeling aggrieved. But after Hog shot him a stern look, he immediately fell silent. He quickly put down the box he was holding and turned to Dumbledore. "Sorry, Principal. I was in the warehouse and didn't see you come in. Please follow me." After apologizing in a flustered manner, Ibrahimovic led Dumbledore up the stairs. "It's okay. You don't have to be so nervous," Dumbledore said, amused by the sight of the former school prefect being ordered around. "Ibrahimovic, haven't you been with Silver Flash Firm for over a year now? Why are you still doing these odd jobs?" "Well, it's not exactly like that," Ibrahimovic replied, scratching his head in embarrassment. "I'm usually responsible for the operations of the entire British head office. Recently, Anduin and Hog returned from abroad, so I came to help out in the store. Don't be fooled by Hog's stern demeanor towards me. The store is just really busy at the moment. If it weren't for his help, I'd actually be even more overwhelmed." End of this chapter. Chapter 613, Talks. "So you usually manage such a large shop by yourself? Can you handle it all?" Dumbledore raised his eyebrows in surprise. From what he knew, Silver Flash Trading Company had grown into a significant business. How could there be only one person left to look after the store? "It's not just me," Ibrahimovic replied, scratching his head with a smirk. "I, Chi-Chi, and Vivienne usually manage the headquarters, but since Silver Flash is now a multinational company, Chi-Chi oversees the entire operation, including finance and production. She doesn't have much time to look after the store. As for Vivienne, she used to help with product design and share some of the workload. But ever since she created the International Mahjong Club a year ago, she's devoted all her attention to her Mahjong business." As they passed by the second floor, Ibrahimovic gave Dumbledore a wink and nodded towards it. Dumbledore followed his gaze and noticed that the second floor, which used to be a living room, had been transformed. The space was much larger than before, though not as wide as the first floor. It was filled with mahjong tables, and nearly 100 people were bustling inside. All the wizards were engrossed in their games, occasionally shouting and cheering or frowning in concentration. It was a lively scene. At one table, someone had played a winning hand, causing the mahjong tiles to burst into a display of gorgeous fireworks. People around turned their heads or got up to congratulate the winner. Dumbledore managed to spot Vivienne among the crowd, her curly hair and laughter standing out. Although he couldn't hear the noise due to soundproofing magic, it was clear that the place was very lively. Dumbledore looked at Ibrahimovic with a suppressed smile. "I didn't expect you to have such a setup on the second floor." "Yeah, it's quite the joke, Principal." Ibrahimovic shrugged helplessly. "Thanks to Vivienne's efforts over the past few years, Mahjong has become popular in various wizarding communities. Our magic Mahjong tables and tiles are selling well. Under Vivienne's persistent requests, Anduin finally agreed to convert the second floor into a mahjong room. So, Vivian organizes people to play cards on the second floor every day, claiming it's for company promotion. Recently, I heard she's planning a mahjong tournament covering all of the UK. She even had the audacity to ask Anduin for funds as prize money. Ibrahimovic sighed. Heh. Dumbledore chuckled at Vivienne's antics. Did Anduin agree to that? And let Vivienne's club occupy the entire second floor? Wouldn't that be a significant loss for you? Of course, Anduin didn't agree. Didn't you notice the soundproofing magic at the entrance? He thought it was too noisy. Ibrahimovic pointed to the metal gate. But Vivienne found a way around it. Although playing mahjong is free, the daily turnover is substantial. She makes a lot of money just by selling drinks. She even started the tournament with this money. You might read about it in the papers soon. Dumbledore couldn't help but laugh. The atmosphere at Silver Flash Trading Company seemed so peculiar. Shouldn't this be the headquarters of a serious multinational company? While chatting, the two arrived on the third floor, which had also been renovated. The original bedroom had been transformed into a suite of offices, one large and 4 smaller ones, along with a communal living room. The largest office belonged to Anduin, while the other 4 were assigned to Kiki, Vivienne, Evie, and Hog. Yes, even Hog had his own office. Apart from Ibrahimovic, the others were considered the senior management of Silver Flash Company. Shaltir, who was seated at the secretary's desk in front of Anduin's office, immediately stood up when she saw the 2 visitors. She greeted them with a professional smile. Hello, Principal Dumbledore. Are you here to see Anduin? Yes, I am. I need to discuss something with him. I heard he is currently with other guests. Should I wait? Dumbledore asked, humbly, as he was seeking assistance. It's no problem. The other guests just arrived as well, and I believe you are familiar with them. Please follow me. I also have some letters to deliver to Anduin, Shaltir replied warmly, leading Dumbledore through the door. It was Dumbledore's first time visiting Anduin's office, and he was taken aback by the sight. The room resembled a medieval noble's armory more than an office. A row of metal armors of various designs stood side by side, some full body, others half body. The walls, tables, and cabinets were adorned with an array of melee weapons, including axes, longswords, broadswords, spears, and shields. The decor was opulent, with magical portraits and murals covering the walls. The furniture, tables, chairs, sofas, and tapestries, was made from high-quality materials and embellished with precious metals. Display cabinets showcased numerous alchemical items, some of which Dumbledore recognized, while others were unfamiliar to him. He even noticed that the carpet underfoot seemed to be made from the pelts of moon-crazy beasts, a detail that raised his eyebrows. It was clear that Anduin was quite wealthy. In the living room area of the office, 3 people were seated. Anduin, who looked much the same as he had a few years ago, the retired former Minister of Magic, Millicent Bagnold, and the current Minister, Cornelius Fudge. Albus, what a pleasant surprise to see you here today, Millicent greeted Dumbledore with a smile. Millicent, I didn't expect to see you here, Dumbledore replied, nodding at her before turning to the others. Good day, gentlemen. Good day, Principal Dumbledore. Please have a seat. If I'm not mistaken, this is your first visit to my office. It seems today is indeed a special day, Anduin said with a smile. He snapped his fingers lightly, and a bottle of wine, along with several glasses, floated out from an exquisite wine cabinet. The glasses filled themselves in mid-air before settling in front of everyone. This is peach sherry, a gift from the Spanish Minister of Magic. It's quite delightful. Since we are all here together today, let's enjoy it, Anduin said, making a gesture of invitation. Dumbledore politely picked up his glass, returned the gesture, and took a sip. The wine was indeed very sweet. Suddenly, he turned to Millicent as if remembering something. By the way, Millicent, how have you been since your retirement? Quite well, Millicent nodded. I took a full year off, but recently, Anduin invited me to contribute my expertise once again. After that, Budnor pouted at Anduin, who was listening to Shaltir's report on the other side. My lord, Minister Andre from Germany has sent another letter. He mentioned that Kuller, the director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, is about to retire soon. He wants to know if you are willing to take over as the director, and if not, If you have a good candidate to suggest, Shaltir said, holding out 2 letters. Additionally, Principal Karkaroff of Durmstrang Academy has also sent a letter requesting you to send a wizard to guide them in opening the training course. Reply to Andre, and tell him that, as before, I am not interested in politics. For the successor, Yasha Berry, the Deputy Director of the Department of Magical Transportation, is a good choice. She has a good reputation and is diligent in her work. She should handle the affairs of the Department of Magical Cooperation well, Anduin instructed. As for Durmstrang, send a letter to the French branch and ask Azalea to take care of it. Her sister can handle the affairs in France temporarily. Although Anai has just graduated, she should be capable enough. Hearing Anduin so casually decide the candidates for the head of the Ministry of Magic of a country on the European continent, as well as the affairs of a magic school, Dumbledore and the others exchanged surprised glances. Had Anduin's influence really reached such a level? At this moment, Anduin, having just explained a bunch of seemingly trivial matters, turned to Dumbledore with a smile. Sorry, Principal Dumbledore. I have something to discuss with Budnor and Fudge. Could you please wait for a while? It doesn't matter. I have a private matter to discuss with you. You should handle your business first, Dumbledore replied, shaking his head indifferently before sitting quietly to the side as an observer. Fudge, who had seemed somewhat overlooked before, perked up when he saw that Anduin was finally going to discuss something serious. Mr. Wilson, you specifically invited Budnor and me here today. Is there something important you wish to discuss? He asked respectfully. Fudge's attitude was very deferential, as he knew that the young man before him was the greatest benefactor of the Ministry of Magic and the undisputed leader of the British magical world. Before Fudge was elected as Minister of Magic, Budnor had even brought him to meet Anduin. To Fudge, that meeting felt more like an interview, as if his position could only be secured with Anduin's approval. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 of 14, The Magic Communication System. It's not a major event, just that I've recently created some small alchemical gadgets and need the Ministry of Magic's assistance. Of course, this will also be very beneficial to the Ministry, Anduin said, picking up several documents from the coffee table beside him. He handed them to the people present, including Dumbledore, who was listening attentively. Full Coverage Magic Real-Time Communication System? Fudge read the title on the document, looking puzzled. He knew nothing about alchemy. He recognized every word in the title, but together they made no sense to him. That's right. This is an alchemy system I've recently developed. It has already passed preliminary tests, and the results are very promising, Anduin replied with a smile and a nod. Mr. Wilson, could you explain this to us a bit more? The contents of this document are really somewhat obscure. Fudge said helplessly after flipping through a few pages. Indeed, Budeno chimed in. Don't make it too complicated for us non-alchemists. Can you explain it in simpler terms? Sorry, my apologies, Anduin nodded apologetically. He then began to explain. The Full Coverage Magic Real-Time Communication System is a network capable of real-time communication over a large area. It consists of 3 main components: the Alchemy Transit Base Station, the Quick Response Alarm Module, and the Communication Terminal. After explaining this part, Anduin looked at the 2 men in front of him. Fudge and Budeno seemed to understand the words but not the concept. Seeing their confusion, Anduin decided to simplify further. Let me give you a simple example. You are both familiar with the communication amulet sold by Silver Flash Trading Company, right? Both men nodded immediately. They were well aware of the communication amulets, which had significantly eased the workload at the Ministry of Magic. Fudge himself carried several communication amulets to stay in touch with various departments. While the current communication amulets are useful, they have clear limitations and shortcomings, Anduin continued, taking out a talisman from his pocket. Even a set of many-to-many communication amulets can only connect with up to 10 other amulets. Someone must always carry the main amulet, and if there's an issue with it, the entire communication network can be paralyzed. My real-time communication system aims to build a large main amulet that connects all other amulets in series. Each sub-amulet is assigned a number. As long as the person holding the communication amulet knows the other party's number, they can communicate in real time without needing to carry multiple amulets. Anduin then turned to Dumbledore. Headmaster, you should understand the significance of this. Dumbledore, being a master alchemist, understood Anduin's documents and the implications. If what you say is true, it means that within the range of the large main amulet, anyone with a communication amulet can communicate conveniently. However, achieving this might be a significant project. Is this what you mean by the alchemy transfer base station? Exactly, Anduin nodded with a smile. The Alchemy Transit Base Station is similar to the Alchemy Room in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes that monitors magical fluctuations in real time. However, its function is to establish a communication network that connects all communication terminals. The terminal is a new type of communication talisman, but its function is far more powerful than the previous versions, Anduin explained as he handed out various props to the group. The terminals came in different forms: a bracelet, a ring, a pendant, and even one resembling a modern phablet. You can inject some magic power into these terminals to see their effects, Anduin invited, raising his hand. Fudge and the others exchanged curious glances before beginning to operate the devices. As they injected magic power, a magical pattern illuminated on the surface of the alchemy props. Suddenly, a translucent light curtain appeared, displaying several buttons labeled Contacts, Call Records, Messages, and Settings. Clicking on any of these buttons brought up a new interface. Intrigued, Budeno clicked on the Contacts interface and saw about 10 numbers stored in it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tentatively, she clicked on the top number. Immediately, the terminal in Fudge's hand vibrated, emitting a cheerful tune. Fudge clicked the Receive button on his interface, and Budeno's surprised face appeared on the translucent light curtain. The two began to communicate happily through the interface. Phew, this is a magical prop indeed. If we can use this to communicate with others who have terminals, it would be far more convenient than a double-sided mirror, Fudge exclaimed in admiration after a brief experience. Yes, this communication terminal incorporates some of the magical principles of double-sided mirrors. Anduin nodded with a smile. These terminals are currently just samples, and their functions are relatively simple. With continuous updates, their performance will improve. Anduin paused for a moment before continuing. Once this system is fully developed, it will support not only real-time messaging, but also other signals, such as broadcasting and even video. Video? Do you mean images like magical photos? Fudge asked, already impressed by the powerful communication functions. It's not that simple, Anduin replied, shaking his head with a smile. It's a magical image that can be played continuously for a long time, similar to how you just saw each other through the interface. However, it requires another piece of alchemy equipment called a magic projector, which is still in the testing stage. Allow me to demonstrate. Anduin added, I've already communicated with the Wizard Radio Company. Once this equipment is mass-produced, they will record video programs and set up a video channel, bringing it into thousands of households, just like Wizard Radio. The magic image you're talking about, why does it sound so much like a Muggle TV? Budeno asked, frowning. Anduin, you know the Wizard Broadcasting Company tried to create a wizarding TV channel, but failed halfway. I know, Anduin nodded. I also know that they failed because they violated the Secrecy Act. If a Muggle accidentally saw a Wizard TV show, it wouldn't be easy to explain. Yes, your invention of imitating Muggle electrical appliances could be seen as illegal misuse of Muggle items. Violating the Secrecy Act could seriously harm your career, Budeno warned, concerned for Anduin's well-being. You're overly concerned, Anduin reassured with a kind smile. I understand your worries, but this is precisely why I established the magic communication system. The reason the Wizard TV channel violated the Secrecy Act was because their signal was set to broadcast indiscriminately. My system will be different. Upon the network of the Muggle world, Anduin began, the magic system I built is a special signal network independent of the Muggle world. It is more similar to the Flu network than Muggle radio, so it is impossible for them to see all this on TV. After subsequent upgrades, it can even show stereoscopic images. Do you expect muggles to see stereoscopic images on TV? This. Budnor was stunned. She didn't understand the system or the network at all, so she turned to Dumbledore beside her. Albus, you are the chairman of the International Federation of Wizards. Do you think this will violate the secrecy law? If all of this is as Anduin said, it really won't violate the secrecy law, Dumbledore replied, flipping through the documents in his hand with great interest. The intricacies here were much more complex than what Anduin had explained. Dumbledore realized that these inventions not only did not violate the secrecy law, but were also planning to build their own mobile network under its cover. After all, once the Wizarding International allows access to Muggle appliances, such as telephones and televisions in the wizarding world, Anduin's current inventions would lose their competitiveness. They are so cheap, and they don't need wizard currency to buy them. What Anduin is doing now is actually taking advantage of the secrecy law, monopolizing the communication market in advance to avoid changes in international laws and regulations in the future. If he could do it, Anduin would probably be the most supportive of the secrecy law in the entire wizarding world, much like how the Mafia, who made their fortunes by selling bootleg alcohol, were the most upholding of prohibition in the early 20th century. But Dumbledore didn't say anything after discovering this. After all, in the current environment, Anduin really wasn't breaking the law, right? After receiving an affirmative answer from the authority, Budnor and Fudge finally breathed a sigh of relief. To strengthen their confidence, Anduin immediately added, "In order to establish such a communication network, I hope to open an independent alchemy room in the Ministry of Magic so that I can build the alchemy transfer base station there. Of course, since the maintenance of the base station uses the magic power in the Ministry of Magic as energy, all of this is naturally not free." Oh? Fudge's eyes lit up at the mention of money. End of this chapter. Chapter 615, Gadget, Seeking a Recommended Monthly Ticket. Seeing Fudge's expression, Anduin smiled. Although the newly appointed Minister of Magic is mediocre, he has his own advantages. For example, in some respects, he is much more eloquent than Budnor. First of all, after the establishment of the Alchemy Transfer Base Station, Silver Flash Trading Company will launch a series of civilian-grade alchemy props in the style of communication terminals in the future. For each new terminal sold, we can provide the Ministry of Magic with a 3% revenue share. In addition, if this magic communication system is extended to foreign countries in the future, we will pay a 10% trade tax. Although this project is large, the cost is also high, and my profit is very limited. At the same time, I will also supply some military-grade communication equipment to the Ministry of Magic, including the real-time communication headsets that have been tested before. Previously, this kind of equipment could only be used in a small area, but after the base station is established, the range of action can be extended to the whole of the UK. In addition to the communication terminal product, such as the video channel opened by the Wizard Radio Company through the Magic Communication System, if the channel is profitable, I will invest in jointly establishing a Silver Flash Magic Broadcasting Company with them, specializing in the development of the entertainment industry. The accompanying magic projector, magic video recorder, and other alchemy products can form an industrial chain which will continuously bring us benefits. Of course, this part will also provide the Ministry of Magic with a 3% business share. Anduin listed the benefits of this system for Fudge, making it clear that it is a win-win situation for both the Ministry of Magic and Silver Flash Trading Company. Then, according to your estimation, after this industrial chain takes shape, how much income will it generate in a year? Fudge couldn't help asking, his eyes lighting up at Anduin's words. The entire industrial chain needs 2 to 3 years to lay out, and it will take a month or two just to build the alchemy room carrying the base station, followed by testing, but after it is fully formed, there will be roughly this much turnover in a year. Anduin casually stretched out his index finger, making a gesture of 1. 1? Fudge looked at Anduin with some doubts, thinking that this was not a lot. Your layout is too small. Anduin shook his head decisively. Could it be 10? Fudge asked tentatively, his eyes widening. But Anduin still smiled and shook his head after hearing the words, "Add another 0. 100 million. Million? Are you referring to galleons? Can this be considered a gadget?" Fudge felt his heart skip a beat after hearing this number, and his voice couldn't help but stammer. "It's a conservative estimate that there are so many, but this is just turnover, and it doesn't mean that there are so many net profits." "Why are you so excited?" Anduin gave Fudge a blank look. "Well, that's an exaggeration, okay?" Fudge felt his heart was almost in his throat, and his body couldn't help but lean forward, as if Anduin in front of him was his boss. "So, is it necessary to install an alchemy room in the Ministry of Magic for the pre-preparation? How much does it cost?" Although Budnor was also surprised by Anduin's grand plan, he remained calm. Fudge also reacted when he heard the words and then looked nervously at Anduin. If the cost was too high, they would not be able to bear it. "Don't worry," Anduin smiled calmly. "As the first alchemy transfer base station, I can build it for the British Ministry of Magic for free. You just need to provide some basic materials." After finishing speaking, Anduin took out a few material lists from the side and handed them to the people in front of him. Fudge took the list and took a closer look, and found that most of the materials on it were common stones, magic alloys, etc., and the only ones that were more expensive were a few pounds of refined mithril, a few kilograms of Ulam steel, and Aether mithril. Although these materials will consume part of the Ministry of Magic's inventory, they are nothing compared to the subsequent benefits. "No problem. Mr. Wilson has taken great care of our British Ministry of Magic. I really don't know how to thank you." Fudge agreed excitedly. "Since Minister Fudge has no objections, let's sign the contract. I will go to the Ministry of Magic to start construction in the near future. The construction of the alchemy room will take about 1 to 2 months, and it will take at least half a year, including the follow-up debugging time. The sooner the construction is completed, the sooner our project can start." Anduin smiled and took out a magic contract from his body and pushed it in front of Fudge. Fudge was more impatient than Anduin at this time, and immediately signed his name with a big wave of his hand. Seeing Fudge accepting this project in such a hurry, Budeno next to him couldn't help giving him a blank look. This idiot, who was sold by someone, is still counting the money with a smile. Building alchemy for free? There is such a good thing? Who doesn't know that free things are the most expensive in the world? And I don't even think about why Anduin insisted on installing this alchemy room in the Ministry of Magic. Driven by the magic power of the Ministry of Magic? This kind of reason can only deceive a fool like Fudge. As a master alchemist, can Anduin not find a better source of magic power? He definitely has the ability to build an alchemy room outside alone. He built the alchemy room in the Ministry of Magic and promised a lot of benefits. To put it bluntly, he wanted to bind the Ministry of Magic and Silver Flash Trading Company into the same interest group, and what Anduin wanted to do was to completely monopolize it. In the future, whenever there are new wizarding broadcasting companies, radio companies, or even video channels, will they all have to act according to Anduin's face? Can you make it without Silver Flash's permission? In addition, what if there are other alchemy companies that want to imitate Silver Flash Trading Company to establish a magic communication network? No way. Because this will not only encroach on Anduin's market, but also affect the interests of the Ministry of Magic, and will definitely be ruthlessly suppressed. The Ministry of Magic may take the lead in the charge. As for piracy, don't even think about it. In fact, in the past 2 years, there have been some products imitating the alchemy props of the Silver Flash Trading Company, but they were all wiped out by Anduin's price reduction strategy. And after these new communication, video recording, and projection products are launched, all pirated products will not only harm Silver Flash Trading Company, but will definitely be severely cracked down by the Ministry of Magic, perhaps worse than dealing with Death Eaters. Budnor can now imagine that the entertainment industry in the entire British magic world will probably be dominated by Anduin, and a huge business empire is about to rise. However, as a retired person, she has no position to stand up and speak for the Ministry of Magic at this time, let alone Fudge is in high spirits now, and she might arouse Fudge's resentment by jumping out to pour cold water. Thinking of this, Budnor couldn't help but look at Anduin quietly. This kid probably waited for her to retire before he made such a move. Shaking his head helplessly, as the saying goes, he doesn't plan for anything when he's not in his position. Budnor doesn't bother to think so much now, and just asks Anduin out of curiosity, "By the way, the quick in your communication system. What do you mean by reactive alarm module? Is this also a new product? This is a small gift I prepared for the Ministry of Magic." Anduin explained with a smile. After the communication terminals are popularized in the market, the communication between wizards will become very convenient. When He's wizards encounter danger and emergencies, they can also send out a call for help faster. At this time, the alarm module can improve the response capacity of the law enforcement department. My idea is that the Ministry of Magic can set up a new magic communication dispatching center in the law enforcement department and arrange full-time personnel to stay behind to answer distress calls. This will greatly speed up the response time of the Auror Command. Anduin explained, sharing his vision of applying the alarm system from the Muggle world with two wizards who had little prior contact with him. In the past, the Auror Command mainly relied on the monitoring magic of the Magic Accident and Disaster Department to detect dangerous situations. With this kind of active help channel, the law enforcement department will indeed become more efficient in dealing with emergencies, Budnor said, clearly appreciating the new module. Fudge, standing next to him, also showed a satisfied expression, thinking about the favorable impact the establishment of such a new office would have on the reputation of the Ministry of Magic. He looked at Anduin with even more admiration. "However, what does your development of this system have to do with me? Why don't you just talk to Fudge alone?" Budnor asked Anduin curiously. Currently, the United Kingdom and Germany have accepted this communication system, but if we want to continue to expand, we need to communicate with other countries. This is a big project and must be discussed directly with the local ministers of magic. However, I am not very familiar with the ministers of magic in every country, Anduin said, smiling meaningfully at Budnor. "Oh, so you plan to ask me to be your lobbyist?" Budnor realized that Anduin wanted her to work for Silver Flash Trading Company and help sell this system to the ministries of magic in other countries. After all, she had been the Minister of Magic for 10 years. Because of her tough style and quick handling of affairs, she was quite famous in the international wizarding community and had close relationships with many ministers of magic. Budnor lowered her head and thought for a moment. She had resigned from the Ministry of Magic and was enjoying her retirement life. She had plenty of time. She then turned her head and looked at Anduin with a playful expression. "I didn't expect that one day you would recruit me instead. So, what kind of salary are you going to offer me? If you agree, I am willing to pay a basic salary equivalent to that of the Minister of Magic, 2,000 galleons per year. In addition, every time an order is negotiated, I will also pay a commission based on the proportion of the country's wizarding population. For big countries like the United States and France, the commission would be 3,000 galleons, 2,000 galleons for a medium-sized country, and 1,000 galleons for a small country. What do you think?" Anduin smiled and presented his offer. End of this chapter. Chapter 616, The Invitation. After hearing Anduin's words, not only Budnor and Fudge, but even Dumbledore, who was listening, couldn't help but show a surprised expression. "Are you serious?" Budnor initially thought Anduin was joking, but when she saw the firmness in his eyes, she couldn't help but ask, "As long as you agree, I can sign an employment contract with you right now, and all the aforementioned terms will be included." Anduin smiled and took out a document, pushing it in front of Budnor. It was clear he had prepared it long ago. Huh. After quickly scanning the terms, Budnor immediately fell into deep thought. The conditions Anduin offered were too generous to ignore. Given her qualifications, it wouldn't be difficult for her to lobby the ministers of magic in several countries to establish this magical communication system. In fact, for Budnor, completing this work would be more like a publicly funded trip. Of course, her extensive network was also a testament to her value, which is why Anduin had warmly invited her. Despite this, she couldn't shake the feeling that this money is too easy to earn. Fudge, standing next to her, found Budnor's hesitation almost laughable. After hearing Anduin's offer, he himself felt tempted to resign immediately and join Anduin. Of course, he wasn't Budnor, and he couldn't say for sure if Anduin would even want him. "Well, I really can't think of any reason to refuse," Budnor finally said, letting out a long breath. She was ultimately swayed by Anduin's financial offer. "You won't regret this decision. This is a convenience project that can achieve a win-win situation for Silver Flash and the Ministry of Magic, especially after other wizarding areas see the popularity of communication terminals in the UK," Anduin assured her. He knew the project would take a lot of time, and even if Budnor's lobbying was successful, it would not be fully rolled out for several years. "A win-win? In my opinion, you obviously win twice," Budnor shook her head helplessly. She couldn't help but tease. "You seem to have a knack for poaching talent from the Ministry of Magic. First Moody and Azalea, and now me." Anduin put on an innocent expression. "You really wrong me by saying that. Azalea doesn't hold an important position in the Ministry of Magic, and Moody, like you, only accepted my re-employment offer after retirement. Plus, he's a shareholder of Silver Flash Commercial Bank." "Don't pretend to be pitiful in front of me," Budnor said, curling her lips in disbelief. "I've heard that you took down an unknown number of wanted criminals in North America 2 years ago as the bounty hunter Deathbird. You even made the President of the U.S. Congress send medals to the UK. That doesn't match your harmless appearance." "You can't blame me," Anduin shrugged helplessly. "I went to the United States for business, but those purgers came after me. The bonus from the U.S. Congress was too tempting to ignore, wasn't it?" "You've become quite the money grubber in the past 2 years," Budnor complained, but she still saw Anduin as a firm and trustworthy person, so she didn't say much more. Afterward, Anduin finalized a large number of project details with Fudge and Budnor, including the time, location, and coordinating personnel to build the alchemy room. Once the details were settled, Budnor and Fudge left the office, satisfied, leaving Anduin and Dumbledore alone in the room. At this moment, Dumbledore found it even more difficult to make the request he had in mind. He had just witnessed Anduin discussing a project worth millions of galleons, but he could only bite the bullet and proceed. "Anduin," Dumbledore began hesitantly, "I didn't expect you to achieve such remarkable accomplishments just a few years after graduation. It really puts me, an old guy, to shame," Dumbledore said with a warm smile. "You flatter me, Headmaster," Anduin replied. With his current status, he no longer needed to be as cautious as before in front of Dumbledore. "I assume you came here today for something important." Seeing Anduin's direct approach, Dumbledore didn't beat around the bush. "Your tactical training methods have caused quite a stir in the international wizarding community over the past 2 years. It's truly groundbreaking. As far as I know, many wizarding schools are preparing to offer similar courses, and Hogwarts is no exception." "So that's what this is about," Anduin nodded knowingly. Half a year after his trip to Germany, he had officially published his first book, Tactical Training. The book covered a wide range of topics, including training, tactical strategy, and equipment use. It also offered a unique interpretation of magical power, spell power, and magic sensitivity, establishing many new standards. Among these was the Wilson training method, which Anduin himself had invented. This method provided a way to improve magic sensitivity. Anduin not only defined this concept, but also quantified the standards and methods for active training. As a result, tactical training quickly sparked discussions in the international wizarding academic community. Scholars from various countries conducted experimental tests and confirmed the effectiveness of the training method on magic sensitivity. With endorsements from the ministries of magic in several countries, the research was published, pushing tactical training into the spotlight once again. Consequently, Anduin and Silver Flash Trading Company gained further recognition. Several magic schools even considered introducing this training method. "Hogwarts wants to introduce the training method? Of course, there's no problem. I'll arrange for personnel to enter the school immediately," Anduin said, lowering his head in thought. Azalea needs to go to Durmstrang. Moody has completed his guidance at Ilvermorny, but still needs to go to Beauxbatons. I'll talk to Fudge later and transfer an Auror from the law enforcement department who has received my personal training to Hogwarts. Or perhaps Mavis. She has both theoretical knowledge and practical skills. Her abilities are outstanding, and she is competent enough to serve as the school's training instructor. Whether you let her start as a professor or guide her for a period of time, I don't think Fudge and Mavis will have any objections, Anduin concluded after a moment of thought. No. Dumbledore shook his head with a wry smile. I want to invite you to Hogwarts to be the professor of tactical training. Me? As a professor of tactical training? Anduin raised his eyebrows in surprise. Headmaster, are you serious? You know how busy Silver Flash Trading Company is. I can't afford to delay projects that take years to complete. Moreover, generally speaking, the students at Hogwarts only need to learn the training method part. The complete tactical training is meant for training combat personnel like Aurors, Anduin added. You heard me right. I want you, and I want the subject to be the complete tactical training. Dumbledore's gaze was firm. As for the schedule, I can promise you some privileges, such as free access to the school and reduced teaching hours. I hope you will seriously consider it. Anduin fell into deep thought, contemplating Dumbledore's serious proposal. Anduin, still puzzled, asked, Can you tell me the reason? Why do you need me so urgently? Dumbledore's eyes showed a hint of seriousness as he replied, Darkness is approaching, Anduin. I can feel that the mysterious man is about to return. You should know that he is not truly dead, and I am already old. Hogwarts needs someone strong and determined to guard it. You mean Voldemort? Anduin asked, showing no fear of the taboo name. I am prepared for him. The dark mark has not dissipated, and the curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts position still lingers. But that doesn't mean I need to go to Hogwarts in person, does it? Anduin stared sharply at Dumbledore. Headmaster, I want you to promise that once the Dark Lord shows signs of recovery, I will not stand by and watch. I will never forg at Lily's blood feud. I knew you never lacked courage, Dumbledore nodded appreciatively. But his goal must be at Hogwarts because Harry is there. He is going to enroll this year. Wouldn't you like to teach him yourself? I have to admit, your reasons are compelling, Anduin nodded, feeling a bit tempted. However, he then shook his head. But it doesn't completely convince me. I believe that with you there, Harry's safety at Hogwarts will not be threatened. Teaching him doesn't have to be at the school. I can be his guardian. He can get the best care from me during a few vacations. I can teach him how to protect himself, even if Voldemort stands before him. Anduin's confident demeanor made Dumbledore more certain of his previous thoughts. This young man might be even more capable than he had imagined. Dumbledore's smile widened as he looked at Anduin. Anduin, would you like to hear the conditions I have for you? Dumbledore asked. End of this chapter. Chapter 617, The Sorcerer's Stone. Conditions? Anduin asked, intrigued by Dumbledore's eagerness to have him return to Hogwarts. All right, I'm curious to see what price the headmaster is willing to pay. Dumbledore reached into his robes and produced a small box. He opened it and pushed it towards Anduin. I wonder if you might be interested in this? Anduin leaned forward, recognizing the familiar magic alloy inside. Flame alloy? He said, his interest piqued. I've used some recently, and having 5 more parts would indeed be valuable. However, after a moment's hesitation, Anduin shook his head. I'm sorry, but if it's just this, I'm afraid it's not enough. While these Lemel alloys are precious, I don't urgently need them. Dumbledore observed Anduin's reaction closely. It was clear that Anduin was familiar with the Lemel alloy, and perhaps even had some in his possession. Dumbledore hadn't expected this young man to be so well-resourced. Feeling a bit cornered, he decided to reveal his trump card. What about the Sorcerer's Stone? Dumbledore asked, watching Anduin's eyes widen in surprise. Would you be interested in that? The Sorcerer's Stone? You mean Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone? Anduin's voice was filled with astonishment. The only remaining one is supposed to be with Flamel himself. How do you have it? And even if you do, would you really give me something so valuable? It is indeed Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore confirmed. And yes, it is in my possession, but only temporarily. I'm keeping it safe for him. I can't give it to you outright, but I can ask Nicholas if he would allow you to borrow it for research. Of course, I can't guarantee his response." Anduin fell silent, contemplating the offer. The Phoenix, with the silver spear, had once sought the Philosopher's Stone in France, but after decades, they had found no trace of it. Now, the opportunity to study the Sorcerer's Stone was within his grasp. It was an offer too tempting to ignore. Seeing Anduin's interest, Dumbledore continued, "Additionally, I can help promote your magic communication system in the international wizarding community. As the current president of the International Confederation of Wizards, I can endorse your system, which should alleviate many of the Ministry of Magic's concerns. I will also work on getting Sirius Black back to England as soon as possible." 3 years ago, Anduin had successfully dismantled the remnants of the Silver Spear in Germany, bringing significant benefits to Britain. As a result, the Order of Merlin and the Wizengamot had agreed to overturn Sirius Black's criminal status. However, because Peter Pettigrew had not been captured, the Ministry of Magic was hesitant to publicly announce Black's exoneration, fearing it would cause panic among the wizarding populace. To protect their reputation, the Wizengamot had only released Black secretly, with the condition that he not remain in the UK. Anduin had accepted this compromise, understanding the political delicacies involved. It was already a significant victory to have Sirius's freedom restored. Currently, under Anduin's arrangement, Black was residing in France, working under the guise of an employee at the French branch of Silver. Dumbledore's offer was compelling. The chance to study the Sorcerer's Stone, the endorsement of his communication system, and the possibility of bringing Sirius back to England were all powerful incentives. Anduin knew he had to consider this proposal seriously. Flash Trading Company. It is also for this reason that Anduin was so relieved to let Azalea leave the French branch to go to Durmstrang to teach the subject of training science. Now, in addition to her sister Anise, France has Blake taking care of things on the side. "I have to say, you are really an excellent lobbyist," Anduin sighed softly. "Well, I was convinced by you, Principal Dumbledore, to go to Hogwarts and take on the job of tactical training. I accept." "You won't regret this decision," Dumbledore said, visibly relieved to see Anduin finally agree. However, Anduin's expression immediately became serious again. "Since I am teaching tactical training personally, I must do my best. So whether it is in terms of material preparation or course arrangement, I will need the absolute support of the school. I hope you can be mentally prepared for that." "No problem," Dumbledore agreed without hesitation. "You can ask for any support you need, even if it requires cooperation from other subjects." "That's good." Anduin nodded in satisfaction. After thinking for a moment, he took out a piece of parchment and began to write. After a while, he handed over the parchment filled with words. "This is the catalog of teaching aids for the next school year, covering grades 1 to 7. These items will be available at Silver Flash Trading Company within 2 weeks. Please include it when sending out the admission notices." Dumbledore took the catalog and scanned it briefly, finding that it contained some very basic teaching aids. He immediately nodded in agreement. Anduin continued, "In addition, my course schedule will be different from other subjects. There is no need to divide each grade into 2 classes. I will send you the schedule later." "No problem," Dumbledore replied, understanding why Anduin had such an arrangement. After all, Anduin was a busy man and couldn't devote all his energy to the school. At Hogwarts, to ensure the quality of teaching, each compulsory course in grades 1 to 5 is divided into 2 classes. After passing the OWL exam, each subject in grades 6 to 7 is reduced to 1 advanced class. This means each professor has to teach at least 12 classes a week, with at least 2 classes a day from Monday to Friday. The school schedule typically includes 1 class in the morning and 1 to 2 in the afternoon. Therefore, professors of all compulsory courses are very busy every day. Anduin's training method must start from elementary school, making it a compulsory course. If he followed the same schedule as other professors, he would have no time for himself from Monday to Friday. By not dividing the classes for grades 1 to 5, Anduin would only need to teach 7 classes a week, freeing up 1 to 2 days. Seeing that Dumbledore agreed so readily, Anduin nodded in satisfaction. It seemed the headmaster was sincere in his efforts. The tactical training of the school was on track. Very well, since my schedule will be relatively tight in the near future, the coordinating meeting before the start of the school will take at least a month to be held. Can it be set for July 7? Please have the deans of the 4 houses, the head nurse from the medical room, and Hagrid attend. I will transport the teaching equipment to the school and attend the meeting, Anduin suggested after thinking for a moment. Huh? A meeting? Dumbledore was a little dazed. He had never worked with Anduin before and didn't know his style. Wasn't this just about teaching a class? Why a special meeting? And why involve the other deans and the head nurse? One question after another flashed in Dumbledore's mind, and for some reason, a sense of ominous premonition suddenly appeared in his heart. Is a meeting held every school year? Hearing Dumbledore's question, Anduin was surprised. If there is no urgent matter during the summer vacation, we usually communicate through owl letters. How about you tell me the things that require the cooperation of the various houses, and then I will communicate with them? Dumbledore suggested with a smile. No, Anduin shook his head resolutely. Teaching in school is not something to be taken lightly. Tactical training is a serious subject, and there are very strict teaching arrangements for diet, nutrition, medical care, rest, and other subjects. According to the requirements, a teaching meeting must be held at that time, and no one can be absent. It's all right. Dumbledore could only respond when he saw Anduin's serious expression. He could already imagine how the heads of houses would react, especially Professor McGonagall. Well, that's all the preparations needed for the new subject at the moment. I will contact you again if there is any need. Anduin got up and personally escorted Dumbledore out of the Silver Flash Trading Company. After walking out of the gate of Silver Flash Firm, Dumbledore couldn't help but show a wry smile. It seems that I still don't fully understand Minerva's so-called grandness. Maybe after Anduin returns to school, things will be better. I'm afraid it's not just the students who will have their days changed. On the other side, after sending Dumbledore away, Anduin immediately sought out Shaltir. Since he took over the teaching job at Hogwarts, there were many arrangements that needed to be redeployed. Are you going to teach at Hogwarts? My lord, you must have been under the imperious curse by Headmaster Dumbledore, right? After hearing Anduin's decision, Shaltir stared at him in astonishment. She even wanted to put her hand on his forehead to see if Anduin had a fever. The offer made by the headmaster is really hard to refuse. You and Hog should prepare, and then you will come back to school with me. Ignoring Shaltir's witty words, Anduin ordered in a cold voice. What about the magic communication system? That thing is a large-scale alchemy project. Not everyone can handle it, Shaltir asked, puzzled. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 and 18, Ginny and Neville. I will still handle the magic communication network in the UK. There is no need to worry about this. The trouble now is Germany. Andre has also signed a contract with us, Anduin said, deep in thought. It seems that we can only ask for foreign aid. Next, I will send a letter to Mr. Burns, asking him to come back and help. With his level of alchemy, he only needs to see me build one base station to take over smoothly. Now that's the only way to go, Shaltir said, curling her lips helplessly. She had hoped to travel abroad with Anduin again, but instead she was returning to Hogwarts. After sending Shaltir away, Anduin made a brief tidy-up and immediately went to the headquarters of the Silver Flash Trading Company. Since he was going to teach in person, he had to prepare some things. Anduin no longer lived in Diagon Alley. He had bought a manor in Godric's Hollow as his residence. As soon as he returned home, Anduin heard a noise coming from outside. Looking out the window, he saw Neville, Ginny, and Thor playing in the yard. This Thor, Anduin shook his head speechlessly. He was supposed to supervise the training of these two, but he's ended up playing with them. When he went downstairs, the two children were so engrossed in their play that they didn't notice Anduin's presence. Fallen Prince Neville, your conspiracy has been discovered by my suicide bird. Surrender now, or face my wrath. Ginny shouted, holding a training long sword made of rattan with a righteous posture. Neville, also holding a vine sword, muttered helplessly, didn't we agree to fight one-on-one? Why are you riding a Thunderbird? Ginny was sitting majestically on Thor, talking to Neville from her elevated position. Neville, why don't you just follow your lines? She said, curling her lips in displeasure. I'm the incarnation of justice, succession bird, a knight. Naturally, I need my mount. That's ridiculous, I'm not an idiot, Neville said, throwing the vine sword to the ground. I surrender. You win, messenger of justice. No, why didn't you follow the script? Ginny became anxious when Neville gave up and urged the Thunderbird under her. Let's ignore him. Come on, Thor, bite him. However, Thor, who had an adult figure, let out a strange scream of disgust and remained lying on the ground, ignoring Ginny. Why are you like this? It's really boring, Ginny said, poking Thor's nape with the vine sword in dissatisfaction. Unexpectedly, Thor let out a comfortable moan, as if Ginny was massaging him. Cough! Cough! A coughing sound interrupted their play. Ginny and Neville turned to see Anduin standing nearby. Seeing that they were caught being lazy, Neville picked up the long sword he had thrown aside and smiled awkwardly. Ginny, with a face of surprise, jumped off Thor and rushed to Anduin's arms. Godfather, why did you come back so early today? Neville and I are recreating the duel scene between you and the fallen Prince Lesenbra. Do you think we act like it? Ginny hugged Anduin's arm, winking at Neville. Don't try to cover up your laziness, Anduin said, seeing through Ginny's plan. This wasn't the first time. When Anduin returned to England, he often brought his goddaughter with him. Due to the close relationship between the Neville family and Anduin, he would occasionally bring Neville along as well. As a result, the two often received some basic training from him. Anduin initially planned to lay a solid foundation for them, but Ginny was a playful girl who often took advantage of his inattention to slack off. Neville, on the other hand, was much more honest but also too simple and straightforward, often getting coerced by Ginny into goofing off together. We didn't, really, Ginny protested, shaking Anduin's arm coquettishly. Didn't we sweat all over? We've only been playing here for less than 10 minutes. If you don't believe me, ask Neville. Oh? Anduin smiled and looked at Neville. Tell me, how long did you actually train? Although Ginny was king at him, Neville was not good at lying. I'm sorry, Uncle Wilson. We only practiced for less than an hour in total. How could you be so stupid? Ginny stomped her feet angrily when she saw that Neville had sold them out so easily. Okay, Anduin looked at Ginny reproachfully. Saul is watching your every move. Even if Neville didn't tell me, do you think you could fool me? Okay, so Saul, you're a traitor too. Ginny, who had been caught by Anduin, didn't admit her mistake. Instead, she pursed her lips and glared at Thunderbird, as if Saul was the one at fault. But Saul gave Ginny a very arrogant look. If he didn't think that Ginny gave him a comfortable massage, he probably wouldn't have let her climb on his back. After yelling and scolding, Ginny turned into an obedient girl again, leaning on Anduin's arm and putting on a pitiful expression. I know I'm wrong, Godfather. Please don't be mad, okay? Hey! Seeing Ginny's expression, Anduin shook his head helplessly. He really had no way to deal with his goddaughter. All right, you two pack up and come back to the room with me. Yes, Godfather. Seeing Anduin's softened expression, Ginny immediately returned to her cheerful self. She then asked, Godfather, did my posture just now look like yours when you faced the fallen prince? Not quite. Anduin gave her an annoyed look. Talking nonsense with your opponent in a battle is simply courting death. In a real battle, you must be unexpected and try to hide your intentions as much as possible. Lesenbra was obviously killed by my sneak attack. Besides, I am not the embodiment of justice. If it weren't for the fact that the vampire prince had an enmity with Shaltir and was rich with rewards, would I have dared to provoke him? Anduin murmured silently in his heart, then turned his head to look at the taciturn Neville. By the way, Neville, how are your parents doing recently? It's been 2 months. Their symptoms should have improved, right? Yeah. Hearing Anduin mention his parents, Neville became more talkative. Your potion's effect is very obvious. When Dad and Mom see me now, I can feel that they seem to recognize me. My grandma and I even heard my mother call out my name once. The therapist from Sranknat Mungos said they occasionally recover their memory for short periods. Grandma even cried happily after learning the news. Thank you very much, Uncle Wilson. This is what I should do. I'm just fulfilling the promise between us. Anduin shook his head indifferently, then specifically urged. However, the treatment of Frank and Alice still requires a long course of treatment. This may last for 1 or 2 years, so you and your grandma should not be too impatient. After several years of constant trials and experiments, Anduin had gradually figured out the illness of the Longbottoms. Frank and Alice were not simply suffering from amnesia, their souls were severely traumatized. The amnesia they exhibited was just a dominant symptom, equivalent to the body's self-protection mechanism. By sealing up the memory, Anduin had finally found a way to treat the Longbottoms' condition. Half a year ago, after using more than a dozen experimental materials, he discovered a method to heal their soul wounds. During his travels in Africa, he came across an unnamed potion formula that had the effect of slowly healing the soul. After dozens of improvements, Anduin perfected the potion, achieving the best healing effect with the least side effects. Healing the soul, however, is not a simple task and requires a long time, but with this treatment method, there is hope. According to Anduin's estimation, once the Longbottoms recover to a certain level, their body's natural healing abilities will be activated, accelerating their recovery. Anduin glanced at Neville, who was standing next to him. The young boy had endured so much pain at such a young age. His grandmother, Augusta, had a bad temper, which caused Neville to become increasingly introverted and insecure. Augusta even mentioned that the child had become somewhat forgetful. This was why Anduin often took Neville out after returning to England. Since he had been traveling around the world for years, he hadn't paid much attention to his friend's son. As a result, he failed to notice Neville's submissive demeanor in time. Perhaps returning to Hogwarts wouldn't be a bad thing. At least there, Anduin could take better care of the child. With this thought, Anduin nodded silently to himself. He then smiled at Neville and asked, "By the way, you should be old enough to start school this year. How do you feel about your future life at Hogwarts?" Neville, a bit apprehensive, responded, I can't say I'm looking forward to it. Grandma said that if I fail to be sorted into Gryffindor, I will completely disgrace the Longbottom family. End of this chapter. Chapter 619, The Meeting. If you can't get into Gryffindor, it's not the end of the world, Ginny said nonchalantly from the other side. Your godfather graduated from Slytherin. If you can't get into Gryffindor, you can always aim for Slytherin. Ah? But I'm afraid Grandma would drown me in her spit. She always says that all the wizards in the Longbottom family graduated from Gryffindor. It's a symbol of courage, Neville said nervously, scratching his head. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Your talent is actually very good. As long as you let nature take its course, your future achievements will be limitless, Anduin laughed. He wasn't just trying to comfort Neville. Although Augusta was always strict with him, she also provided necessary care. Neville's roots were quite strong, making him good material for martial arts. Thank you, Uncle Wilson, Neville said, thinking Anduin was merely trying to comfort him. He was always full of self-doubt, but he could indeed feel rare joy in Anduin's presence. Seeing that Neville was still acting dull, Anduin didn't mind too much. It takes a lot of time for a person's personality to change. By the way, Neville, you have another surprise waiting for you when you enroll this year. Oh? Really? Neville's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Is something special happening at Hogwarts this year? You'll find out when the time comes, Anduin teased, then urged, hurry up and wash up, and then we'll have dinner together. Ginny and Neville cheered immediately at the prospect. If there was one thing they loved about visiting Anduin, it was the sumptuous food they could enjoy every day. In a rare good mood, Anduin cooked the meal himself, letting the two youngsters have a feast. He then personally watched them go home through the Flu network. After sending off the two young wizards, Anduin returned to his suitcase space to continue working. His magic suitcase had been upgraded many times. Although the internal environment hadn't changed much, the space had more than doubled in size. Now, more than half of the interior space was dedicated to a magical animal breeding area. The animals raised there were still primarily for spare ingredients, but under his careful care, the populations of Thibaut warthogs and Reem cattle had multiplied several times over. Relying solely on what they ate, couldn't keep up with the reproduction speed of these creatures. After years of nourishment from magical animal meat, the physique of the group had improved significantly. At this time, Anduin's magic power reserves were close to 2,000 points, reaching 1,063 points. This wasn't just from eating magical animal meat, but also from relying on that sword. After his trip to Germany, Anduin tested the life force and magic power absorbed by Destroyer in many ways, comparing it to the life essence extracted by the life refining array. He found that the life energy extracted by Desolation was indeed purer. In addition to the permanent energy absorption function, the Wild Minds also had the effect of energy refining. After all, the birth of Wild Thunder originated from a thunderbird that wanted to complete the evolution of life. So, in this primitive rune, besides the power to destroy, there was also a hidden ability to purify energy. Of course, the life energy purified by extinction had a certain disadvantage compared to refining into a formation. The amount extracted was relatively small. Anduin could get 12 or 20 points of feedback every time he killed an ordinary wizard. But due to the energy's high purity, once fed back into his body, it could directly increase his upper limit of life and magic power. When he was in the United States, the reason he walked as a bounty hunter, aside from any grievances or bounties, was more to experience the thrill and to test the limits of his abilities. The essence of life through killing had been sublimated, and from Anduin's current reserve of magical power, it was evident how many wizards had fallen under his sword. Even though Anduin had been in the United States for about a year, he had gained a significant reputation locally. Both gangsters and white-collar criminals feared him, indirectly reducing the local crime rate to the point where children cried at night. The final harvest was substantial, and Anduin could even feel that if this continued, he might achieve the goal of eternal life just by killing people. However, this realization did not bring him joy. Instead, it filled him with fear. Anduin was not a bloodthirsty person, but he found himself becoming increasingly indifferent to life. This change in his demeanor made him very uncomfortable. He disliked the feeling of losing control, so in the past 1 or 2 years, Anduin seldom acted on his own. He needed time to adjust himself, so he invested a lot of energy into the business of Silver Flash Trading Company and the teaching and training of Ginny and Neville. The effect of this was noticeable. He felt less indifferent and more humane. Accepting Dumbledore's invitation to return to Hogwarts was not entirely due to the many conditions promised by the other party. After some contemplation, Anduin immersed himself in his laboratory. Teaching hundreds of young wizards was vastly different from training Aurors, and he needed to make more preparations for this. Meanwhile, the magic communication system business undertaken by Silver Flash Trading Company did not fall behind. After Burns accepted his invitation to return to England, Anduin began the extensive construction project of the Alchemy Room. He spent his days working at the Ministry of Magic, and his nights scolding the 2 kids for being lazy and preparing teaching aids. Time flew by, and more than a month passed in the blink of an eye. The date for the planning meeting for the new school year, July 7th, arrived as agreed upon by Anduin and Dumbledore. In the Hogwarts staff lounge, Severus Snape, who had just walked in, looked at Dumbledore and McGonagall at the conference table with dissatisfaction. "It's simply ridiculous. Why do we have to hold such an inexplicable meeting during the holidays? I told you a long time ago, it is not a good idea to invite that kid back. You can see that school hasn't even started yet, and he has already ordered us to come." Snape grumbled. "Don't be so irritable, Severus. This only took up less than half a day of our time. The reason why Anduin called us to a meeting naturally has his reasons. I'm curious to see what he will share with us." Dumbledore responded nonchalantly, trying to calm Snape. "I know exactly what that guy is thinking. As long as you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. Maybe he will assign us some weird tasks, acting as if he is the headmaster." Snape recalled the time when Slytherin was dominated by Anduin, feeling uncomfortable. "Why do you have such a prejudice against Anduin? He helped you a lot in the academy. If it weren't for him, Slytherin wouldn't have won the House Cup for 7 consecutive years." McGonagall said, glancing at Snape with dissatisfaction. She was upset because initially, both the Snake Academy and the Lion Academy were on equal footing. However, due to Anduin's sudden rise, the Snake Academy became the dominant force, while the Lion Academy, under her jurisdiction, struggled. Despite this, Snape still had the audacity to speculate negatively about their hero. "It's because I know him well enough that I know how terrifying that kid is. He's a guy who can't kill anyone," Snape couldn't help but complain in his heart. "I also think it's not a bad idea for Anduin to return to school." While the few people in the lounge were arguing, Flitwick's laughter suddenly interrupted them. They turned their heads to see him approaching. Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, Hagrid, and the head nurse, Madame Pomfrey, entered the room, one after another. After taking their seats, Flitwick continued to laugh. "Anduin is now a big celebrity in the academic world. I can guarantee that just the news of his entry into Hogwarts will become big news. It's a great thing for our school." Etwick was overjoyed when he heard that Anduin was returning to Hogwarts. As his most outstanding student, Flitwick was proud of his achievements. Not to mention, among the many products of Silver Flash Trading Company, there are also his patent stocks. The dividends he receives every year alone make it impossible for him to feel anything but gratitude towards Anduin. Since when did Hogwarts start taking pride in someone joining? Hogwarts, Professor Resume seems to be more commendable. Snape, sitting next to him, curled his lips in disdain. "You can't say that. Hogwarts is proud to have a headmaster like Dumbledore. It's good news that Anduin joined the school," Hagrid said, raising his husky voice in defense of Anduin. "You have a good relationship with him, so naturally you would defend him," Snape retorted, looking at Hagrid with a hint of exasperation. Since the big man became a shareholder of Silver Flash Trading Company, he had become more outspoken. Snape was particularly irked by Hagrid's habit of pairing luxurious accessories with his old leather jacket. As the debate continued, the door of the faculty lounge opened again. Everyone turned to see Anduin, dressed in formal attire, walking in with a stack of thick parchment. "Hey, Anduin, long time no see." Hagrid immediately stood up with a smile and greeted him, stepping forward to give him a firm hug. "I remember we were fishing together 2 weeks ago." "Don't be so dramatic," Anduin muttered, his voice muffled as he was squeezed into Hagrid's belly. After extricating himself from Hagrid's enthusiastic embrace, Anduin took the time to greet the other professors one by one. "Dean Snape, I haven't seen you in a few years, and you still look the same," Anduin said with a smile as he turned to Snape. He couldn't help but think, why is this guy's hair still greasy? Doesn't he know how to wash it? End of this chapter. Chapter 620, Planning. Thanks to you. He's not dead yet." Snape's expression was as stern as ever, his eyes coldly fixed on Anduin, as if someone owed him a great debt. Anduin, unfazed by Snape's attitude, simply smiled. After years of interaction, he had grown accustomed to Snape's demeanor. It was almost amusing. "All right, since Anduin is here, let's officially start today's meeting," Dumbledore announced, seeing that everyone had arrived. He wasted no time and got straight to the point. "No problem, Headmaster Dumbledore," Anduin replied politely, nodding to Dumbledore before addressing the group. "I apologize for calling everyone in during this wonderful summer vacation, but the establishment of the new tactical training subject is crucial and cannot be taken lightly. We need everyone's support." Everyone, except Snape, nodded in agreement. Flitwick spoke up enthusiastically. "If there's anything we can do to help, just let us know. I'm quite interested in seeing how far you can take this course." "Thank you, Professor Flitwick. To be honest, tactical training was inspired by your teachings," Anduin said, not hesitating to praise his former teacher. Snape, watching the exchange, rolled his eyes. He knew Anduin well enough to recognize that the more polite he was, the more troublesome the situation likely was. Anduin continued, "Tactical training is divided into 2 parts, training and combat tactics. The training aspect is similar to what other magic schools offer, but the combat tactics are not typically something minors should be exposed to. Dumbledore specifically requested that I teach the complete tactical training, not just the training part. Given that Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts classes have been subpar for years due to certain circumstances, my curriculum may overlap with defense against the dark arts." The professors nodded in understanding. They were all aware of the difficulties in finding a suitable defense against the dark arts professor each year due to the Dark Lord's curse, which had severely impacted the quality of teaching. Seeing their reactions, Anduin continued, "Under these circumstances, I will give a brief overview of the new discipline's main content. Some details may require the assistance of the deans." Anduin's humility and politeness made it difficult for the deans to refuse. Even Snape couldn't find a reason to object without appearing deliberately obstructive. After confirming their acceptance, Anduin placed a stack of parchment on the table and distributed a few sheets to everyone. "For the next school year's tactical training course, I have arranged it as follows," Anduin began. "I will divide the students into 3 groups: the basic group for 1st and 2nd years, the intermediate group for 3rd to 5th years, and the advanced group for 6th and 7th years. In the basic group, the focus will be on training methods to improve magical sensitivity and physical fitness. At this age, young wizards are still developing their magical perception and potential. Therefore, I plan to provide them with basic intensity saturation workouts. This type of training has its pros and cons. The advantage is that it can quickly enhance the magical activity of young wizards, making them more sensitive to magic, improving their perception, and significantly increasing their spellcasting success rate. The effect year. However, this period will be shorter, lasting about a month. During this time, they might also experience fatigue and lethargy, but the benefits will be worth it in the long run," Anduin explained. Snape's frown deepened. "So you're saying that for the first month, these students will also be too exhausted to fully participate in regular classes? This is highly disruptive." Anduin nodded, acknowledging the concern. "I understand your worries, Professor Snape. My recommendation is to slightly slow down the teaching pace during this initial period. Once the students adapt, their performance will improve significantly, and we can now accelerate the curriculum to cover any lost ground. In fact, their progress might even surpass your expectations." Snape remained skeptical, but chose not to argue further. He knew Anduin well enough to trust that his claims were likely grounded in truth, even if they seemed ambitious. The other heads of houses listened attentively, but did not voice any objections. They were curious about the potential benefits of Anduin's training methods and willing to give them a chance. Anduin continued, "There are also 2 additional requirements for the basic group that will need the school's cooperation." He handed a few pieces of parchment to Dumbledore. "Firstly, the foundation stage requires providing adequate nutrition for all young wizards." Dumbledore scanned the recipes and raised an eyebrow. "It seems that many of these meals require magical animal ingredients. Isn't that quite costly?" Anduin smiled reassuringly. "You don't need to provide magical animal ingredients for every meal. 1 meal a week will suffice. The following pages contain recipes using more common ingredients." He paused before adding, "Additionally, I have a reliable source for Teppo wort pork and Ream beef. Would you be interested?" Dumbledore shook his head politely. "No, thank you. Hogwarts is largely self-sufficient, especially since you introduced a variety of magical animals to the Forbidden Forest 3 years ago. We have an abundance of resources now." "Understood," Anduin replied, accepting the refusal gracefully. He then turned to Professor Flitwick. "For the new students, I need you to prioritize teaching them the levitation charm as soon as possible. It's crucial that they all master this spell early on." Flitwick nodded enthusiastically. "No problem. I'll dedicate the first month of charms lessons to learning and practicing the levitation charm. That should be ample time for them to become proficient." "Excellent," Anduin said, pleased with the cooperation. Now, regarding the improvement group for grades 3 to 5, in addition to basic training, they will undergo combat training. This includes learning basic self-defense spells, combat steps, spellcasting techniques, offensive and defensive drills, first aid, and both fixed-point and mobile warfare spellcasting skills. He continued, "Like the younger students, they will experience an initial period of fatigue and lethargy, but this will last only about a month. The intensity of the training will be worth it, as it will significantly enhance their abilities." The room fell silent as the professors absorbed the information. They understood the potential challenges, but also recognized the long-term benefits for their students. With a collective nod, they signaled their agreement to support Anduin's training program, hopeful for the positive outcomes it promised. However, because they have adapted to their own magic power, the labor pain period will not be particularly long. According to my expectations, it should be within a month. However, the teaching at this stage will involve a lot of practice, and it is inevitable that some injuries will occur. Therefore, we need more wound medicines in the medical room. Professor Snape, here is the list of medicines, Anduin said, pulling out 2 parchments and handing them to Snape and Madame Pomfrey, the head nurse. Is there any mistake? After scanning the list, Snape looked at Anduin as if he had seen a ghost. The symptoms involved in these potions include burns, frostbite, petrification, bone fractures, blood loss, loss of strength, fainting, and even psychosis. They are all over the place, and you require so much. What are you planning to do? Are you taking them to war? No, going to the battlefield is a subject for the professional group. The improvement group has not yet reached that point. These are just some basic medicines. It's better to have more than to need a temporary configuration, Anduin replied seriously. Snape felt as if he had just heard something terrible, which made him stare at Dumbledore with wide eyes. Just follow Anduin's arrangement for now. I believe he will be measured, Dumbledore said, though he also had some doubts. Considering that he had promised Anduin full cooperation, he didn't say much more. Don't worry. If you train under my guidance, you will definitely get injured, but you will not die. I have trained so many Aurors for the Ministry of Magic. Didn't they all survive? Have confidence in what you want to do for these children, Anduin said, actually comforting Snape in turn. If I heard you right, you just said that the Aurors were over? The corners of Snape's eyes couldn't help but twitch. Even Aurors need to be cooked to survive the training. Can those little wizards handle it? End of this chapter.